There's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game. Gonna crack down and shut down the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
Hi, kids. Happy Wednesday to you. My name is, well, you know who I am. It's just a game. You know who you are. What happened? What's been going on? You guys staying busy? Stuff? You up to date on stuff? Thanks to Camby Kepke. Thanks to Danny Austin for holding down the fort for me on Monday. Appreciate their work. I thought they did a great job on what was a very interesting day, and that conversation will slide into day number 2 for us. It's been going on for 3 now. Having said all of that, welcome. Glad you're here. The legend, Bonesaw, Peter Marr is going to join us momentarily. Brent Krahn, another legend, in studio. Lots to talk about with Krahn, especially on the goaltending side, because that seems to be one of the hot topics with this hockey club, away from the general manager and the future of the team and rebuilding and all that crap. What about Dustin Wolf? What about Markstrom? What about Vladar? So we'll get into that with Krahn. Welcome. We are broadcasting live from Treaty 7 territory. It is an inclusive show. Everybody is welcome, regardless of wherever you stand. As long as you don't have hate in your heart, you are always welcome here. We are now officially 1 game in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. The Stanley Cup playoffs, not the NHL playoffs. The Stanley Cup playoffs. 6 road teams have won. 6 road teams have won game 1. That means we've had technically 6 upsets based on standings, including our good friends in the provincial capital and our friends in the center of the universe, which allows me to play my single favorite clip of all time because I think it's appropriate. Gav?
Burglars be far behind. This reporter isn't saying that the burglar is an inhuman monster like the Wolfman, but he very well could be. So, Professor, would you say it's time for everyone to panic?
Yes, I would, Kent.
Professor says it. Time to panic. I think the Oilers are okay. I think Dallas is okay. I think Colorado's okay. I think, Winnipeg played really good last night. Vegas did not. But the one I will say that maybe you should panic, the one that I will say you should perhaps begin to think about when you could get tea times, might be Toronto. Might be Toronto. And not because they're not good enough and not because they don't have the ability, but because they are in that vacuum of the Toronto media sphere. And now that pressure gets cranked up exponentially. You say what you want about Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver. None of it's like Toronto. None of it. That market is going to be setting its hair on fire. They have not enough lighter fluid in Toronto for the amount of hair that's going to be set on fire after last night's debacle against Tampa Bay. And that was in many ways Tampa Bay just exercising their beer muscles. They just know how to do it. They turned it on. Their blue line's going to be interesting. I thought it was interesting for a moment there at 3-0. It's 3-2. Here come the Maple Leafs. Nah, it's over. Braden Point, Calgary kid playing a role there. Okay. Peter Marr coming up. Brent Krahn. Want to sneak this in. Couple things. These are criticisms, I suppose, but maybe, hopefully they're not criticisms. They're just kind of where I think. I'm a little surprised by members of the media who say they were a little surprised by Monday's announcement that Brad Treliving was not coming back, that it was a mutual parting. I am a little bit surprised by the number of people who are surprised by this. Which part of this is surprising? This was long talked about. I mention all the time on this program, the Friedmans, the Johnsons, the Saravellis of the world had all been talking about a fractured relationship. And nothing was announced last week. You go through a weekend and we're surprised. Sure, general managers don't walk away very often. We'll get into that with Peter Marr. But you didn't, as again, my opinion on this. And you need to know where you're getting your information from. So remember my background. I did work for CSEC for 4 years. We parted ways in October. I really don't have any ill will towards anybody there. I think there's a lot of good people. But I'm not surprised. By the way, Brad was one of those guys. There's a loss in that organization that not a lot of people will understand because of what he did beyond his own privy, beyond his own sphere of influence, beyond his own department. Brad was a really positive leader over there. There's a lot of managers, but they didn't have, there's still, you need leaders. And Brad's one of those guys. But again, you need to know where you're getting your information from. So if I sound bitter or twisted, that's you have to make that decision, not me. I will say this. Not surprised at all. The other part that I want to address is who the hell's talking about a rebuild? John Bean gave an answer where he's not allowed to use the word rebuild. And we're all of a sudden discovering this is new news. Sorry, go back and watch Jay Feaster. Jay Feaster said the same thing. Jay Feaster, we're all surprised that this team won't rebuild. Jay Feaster, after they traded Iginla, after they traded Bouwmeester, after they had nothing really to show for it, the next season, Jay Feaster said, my job is to make the playoffs. And that became a highlight on TSN. Think Sportsnet covered it. Lots of people, how can you say that? You're rebuilding. My job is to make the playoffs. So why are we surprised and who's talking about a rebuild here? First of all, Huberdeau, Uyghur, Kadri all have long-term deals. You have Mangiapane. You have the makings of a team that with the right tweaks, again, completely underachieved. But I do believe that in the hysteria, which has been the last couple of days around here, and I'll use the word hysteria, that we're chasing some red herrings out there, kids. I thought this was a really interesting clip from a guy who might know yesterday on Barn Burner, and I want to play it for you. It's an exchange between the three of them, but the guy who played for one of the guys involved in this drama really had an interesting take. Can you play it for me, Gav?
Mean Daryl's back. I think this does mean Daryl's back. And I think when we heard last week, the rumored amount of money that was on the table remaining on Daryl's contract, and if you look at the history of this organization, I don't think this owner was comfortable paying $8 million for a guy not to be here the next 2 years.
I convinced myself that he was back last week.
So are you suggesting that Brad's leaving has little to do with his relationship with Daryl?
I'm just saying that it's become vogue to pile everything at Daryl Sutter's feet right now. It's become the easy out 100%. It's Daryl's fault. It's Daryl's fault. The players hate Daryl. The GM hates Daryl. The organization hates Daryl. Nobody wants to work for Daryl. Yet Daryl's still there, right? Like it is very vogue to use Daryl as the.
I'm not doing that though. I'm just thinking from where I'm sitting that why did the GM leave?
So Rhett, who played for Daryl, worked for Daryl, an interesting take. Is this all on Daryl? I believe that the relationship between the general manager and the coach in a working sense was fractured. But I don't think that's all the issue here. Get into it with Peter Marr and Brent Krahn as we go. The one last thing before we get to Pete, and I hate to keep the Hall of Famer waiting, so I'll make this brief. I guess I'm mad. I guess I'm calling into question some of the reporting or some of the storytelling or whatever. But let me do one more thing. I bristle at is Craig Conroy the right choice for the Calgary Flames? I bristle at that because I think the question is asked improperly. I think the correct question is, are the Calgary Flames correct and right for Craig Conroy? The opposite. Is this the right opportunity? I hope so, because nobody has worked harder for this opportunity. 12 and a half years, whatever it is, special assistant, assistant general manager. He's traveled the globe. He was critical in signing Johnny Gaudreau. He was critical in signing Matt Coronado. He's been critical in signing free agents. He has seen this organization from top to bottom. He has been exposed to the Players Association as his time and as a player. He has worked for Team USA in Olympics and World Championships, I believe. There's nobody more prepared for this job than Craig Conroy. There's nobody who would want this job probably more than Craig Conroy. So it's not whether or not Craig Conroy is right for this job. It's whether or not the Calgary Flames are right for this job. So don't think that Conroy would take this job if he felt he had to do the bidding of the coach or whatever. Craig Conroy, if he takes this job, he believes in his heart of hearts that he can make a difference and he can change it. If he doesn't take this job, then it's probably because he doesn't feel like he can do it, that there's things against him lining up. That happens in business. That happens in life. That happens across the league. I get it. It's emotional. We're fans. They're friends, all these sort of things. But I think the question's wrong. I think the question isn't whether or not Craig Conroy is right for the Calgary Flames. I think it's whether or not the Calgary Flames are right for Craig Conroy. Because dude should be a general manager. He's interviewed before, I believe. I think he has. And he should have been. And I think he would do a bang-up job. But he's got to have control. And part of that control is probably selecting your own coach. All right, enough of me. I know why you're here today. I know exactly why you're here today. To hear the next guest, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary, three locations. McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue Southwest, just off of 14th Street. Bow Ridge Road Northwest. Great deals on snowboards, on ski and equipment. Get in there. Ski Cellar Snowboard. We bring in the 7-time Hall of Famer, the legendary voice of your Calgary Flames, and our dear, dear friend, Peter Marr, joins us this afternoon on Just a Game. Sir, how do we find you today?
Well, I'm very good, Rob. But before we get into any of the discussions that are primary on the agenda these days, I want to congratulate you on receiving the honor from the Calgary Booster Club on behalf of your media work and other work that you've done so many years over in this community. I want to congratulate you on that. Very, very well deserved. And it should be a great night when you're honored. I think it's later this week that they're having the dinner and all of that sort of thing. So again, congratulations.
I appreciate that, sir. For those who don't know, there is a little history between Peter and I when it comes to introducing ourselves as award winners. It goes all the way back to the 04-05 lockout. When the Flames affiliate was in, where was it, Pete? Lowell, right? And we had the voice of the Lowell Lock Monsters on, but we had to refer to the award-winning voice of we never knew what award it was.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yeah. You're bringing back memories for sure.
I am. Well, thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. It means a lot, as you know, coming from you. I'm never going to catch your 7 Hall of Fames, but it's
I don't know. You're doing pretty good. You're in a Hall of Fame, Alberta Sports Hall of Fame, and probably more to come.
Maybe.
Anyway, that's not the important issue.
Yeah, the more important stuff. Monday. Let me start with you. Were you surprised on Monday, Pete? Did the news of the day surprise you?
No, it didn't surprise me, Rob. I had been hearing that Brad Treliving had been offered a new contract, and at least a couple of times from what my sources were telling me, and turned them down on both occasions. So that led me not to be surprised when he came out and made the announcement on Monday that they had mutually agreed for him not to return as general manager of the team after 9 years as the GM of the hockey team. So no, it didn't come down as a surprise to me. Now it's going to be, now I have no idea what's going to happen down the road here, but there's certainly a lot of things that have to take place to get the Flames organization back in ship shape, and they have to have everybody has to be on the same road. I mean, they have to have a plan for this team going forward, and everybody from the owners to the president, to the president of hockey operations, to the general manager and others in the front office and the coaching staff. They've all got to be on that same wavelength to have success for this team going forward.
Pete, and I might be skipping a little bit ahead here, but I think we all agree with that. That's rooted in common sense. That makes so much sense. Is it easier said than done?
Yes, it's easier said than done. There's no question about that, because you've got, a lot of people that are involved here that have different ideas, and some of them go in one direction, some go in another direction. But to me, it's very critical that they all get on the same wavelength. I mean, there's always going to be discussion among the type of people that I mentioned there that are involved with the Flames from top to bottom. But they have their input, but they've all got to be on that same wavelength as to what direction they want to go in with this hockey team. Not one guy wanting to go one way and another guy go another way and then somebody else some other direction. They have to get on that same stream, and they can have some meetings behind the scenes where the people voice their opinions, but at the end of it, they've got to all be on that same wavelength. And I think that's a very important thing that has to be stressed in the Flames offices now, as they go about the process of finding a new general manager and setting up the front office as they want it going forward with this team.
Pete, you and I have done this version for 20 years on and off. We so rarely ever talk about the role or the input of the owner, in this case, Murray Edwards. Can you give us a little context, a little bit about their commitment and why I've been here for 20 years. I've heard Murray speak once to the media. That's it. Why don't we ever hear from the owners?
Okay, Rob, let's go way back to when the team came here in 1980. Okay. At that time, Nelson Scalabrini, a businessman from Vancouver, and was the primary owner of the team. He also had some minority owners that were Calgary businessmen. At that point, it did not include Murray Edwards. Scalabrini came in. He was the major owner for the first year. After that, he sold his shares to the team to the other Calgary people, the Seaman brothers, Harley Hotchkiss, and Norm Green, and a few other people. Right. And they took over the running of the team. And when they took over running of the team, they said, we will not be speaking public. Mm-hmm. We're going to leave that up to our president and CEO to deal with the public. We're going to remain behind the scenes. We're going to support this team. We're going to provide everything that the team needs to go forward, and but let the public actions be handled by other people other than ownership. Now, when Harley was there, Harley Hotchkiss, the late Harley, when he was there, he did go public a few times, but a lot of that was to do with his job as when he eventually became chairman of the board of the National Hockey League. And was basically, right in there with Commissioner Gary Bettman. And he also had some comments when the Flames were in those cash call situations. A lot of people forget that in 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, when the team was going through a stretch where there were no playoffs for 7 consecutive years, the Saddle Dome had about 8,000 people going to the games. So that wasn't enough money to operate a hockey team. So the owners had to kick in some money to keep things going, and they were very glad to do that. And of course, at that time, Harley Hotchkiss, rather than sell the team, there were lots of rumors that this team might get sold to people in Dallas, Houston, and some other places. Yep. But Harley Hotchkiss made it very clear that going forward, there's going to be a salary cap in the NHL, and we're going to be able to put things, back to a keel where we can operate on a level with everybody else in the league. So. And of course, eventually we did get the salary cap. The Flames then had that great run in 2004 when they came in and went to the Stanley Cup final. And I think I've said it before, Rob, in some interviews we've done. I really believe that 04 run, that 04 run, had that not happened, this team might not be in Calgary today, because they were looking for cash calls going into that season because of the low crowds. That season did not start out very well, the 03-04 campaign. I remember near the 20th or so of November, Flames had a Saturday night game in Edmonton, lost the game, falling into last place in the conference. And I remember flying back from Edmonton on the charter flight with the team, sitting across the aisle from Daryl Sutter, who at the time was the general manager and coach of the team. Yep. And when we arrived in Calgary, he leaned over to me and he said, be around tomorrow. I'm going to be making a deal, a trade. And that is when he acquired Mika Kiprasov to come in with the team. And from there, everything turned around. The team went on. They had that great run, essentially won the Stanley Cup. They didn't count the goal, but anyway, we'll get into that later another time. But that team went on to the Stanley Cup final. And then the next year, there was no hockey at all. So can you imagine if the Flames had gone 8 straight years, no playoffs, and then no hockey at all in that 9th year, people wouldn't be going back to sell out the Saddledome on a nightly basis as they did after that 0-4 run. So, and also with the ownership of the team, and I should point this out very clearly, is that ever since the NHL has had the salary cap, the Flame ownership has always, other than one season, the Flames always reach the maximum or close to the maximum of the salary cap with regard to bringing in players for this team to make them competitive and contest for a Stanley Cup. There was only 1 year they didn't do that. That was the year after they traded Jerome McGinley and Jay Bullmeister, 2 guys that were prominent parts of the team at that point in time. Yep. And the next year they come in, as you were mentioning there earlier, the rebuild was in, but the next year they had a fair amount of success. And so the following year after that, again, they boosted up the salary cap to the salary cap max for this team. So, and the other thing that Flames ownership have done throughout the entire stage of this, after the local owners turn over, is that they set up situations where they would fund worthwhile local organizations. They've got millions and millions of dollars that they've contributed to various charities in the Calgary area. So no, they don't speak public, but they leave that up to going back to the start of this team when Cliff Fletcher was here. He was both the president and general manager. He spoke on behalf of ownership. After that, coming in was Bill Hay. Mm-hmm. And then after that, there was you had Ken King come in, and until Ken passed away, John Bean is a guy that's the president and CEO of the team presently. He's more of a quiet guy. He's a fellow that is not used to being in the public eye and not overly willing to be in the public eye. So, he most of the time passes it on to the general manager to be the guy, to be the spokesman for the team, which we heard from Brad Treliving over the past 9 years or so, or not 9 years, but in the last 3 or 4 years since John has been the president and CEO of the hockey team. And interestingly, going back in history, this is the first time that a general manager has left the Flames and at a situation where the ownership and the other people within management were hoping and figuring he was going to return to that position. All the other guys that were GMs, when they left, they were either let go or, in the case of Cliff Fletcher, he had been GM of the team since 1972, going back to the Atlanta days. He had a very good offer to go be the general manager in Toronto, and so he left for that challenge. So this is very, very unique, the way this has all come down with Brad Treliving this week.
Yeah, and I would almost think, Pete, that it's a little bit unique in hockey, too. I mean, Doug Wilson left, but that was because of health reasons and things like that. For a general manager to actually step aside from a job is rare. Pete, I do want to go back just for context purposes, and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that finds this stuff interesting. When the owners took over after Nelson Skalbania and they said that they were going to let the president talk, was that a result of, Harold Ballard in Toronto, Peter Potlington up in Edmonton, that there were owners at that time who were very vocal and very much out there? Was that a reaction to what was going on in other markets?
Well, I'm not sure if that was the reaction to that. I have the suspicion that some of that was. I think some of the other part of that was they wanted to leave everything to hockey people to make the commentaries on behalf of ownership of the team. They would stay in the background. Not that they didn't care about what was going on with the team, but they just didn't want to be into the public forefront while they were ownership of the hockey team. They, basically wanted to be quiet owners and, do as best they can to have the team be successful. Because there's no doubt that Nelson Skalbania, with the way he was carrying on, Peter Pocklington, rather, who actually was a friend of Nelson Skalbania, going back a little bit further in time. He was, Pocklington, very, very outspoken as owner in Edmonton. And of course, Harold Ballard in Toronto. I mean, I could talk all day. I had the opportunity of being broadcaster for the Maple Leafs there for 3 years when Harold was the general manager, was the owner of the Maple Leafs. So there's all kinds of stories there that we can told about how bombastic that Harold Ballard was in his time as owner of the Maple Leafs. So yeah, so I think it's the way it should be with the way the Flames ownership handles things in the background. But very much concerned about the operation of the team. This is not to say they don't care. It's just that they don't want to be going public, leaving that up to the hockey people.
By the way, everything that you heard about Harold Ballard is true, right, Pete? Like, you don't have to embellish Harold Ballard stories, do you?
No, don't have to embellish those one little bit. So I had being around him as I was. I mean, it was there were all kinds of things that were going on that were outlandish, to say the least. I mean, it brought back the memory of when Bruce Boudreau was unceremoniously let go in Vancouver earlier this season from the coaching job there. It brought back the memories when I was there when Ballard fired Roger Nielsen. And when Roger was coach of the Leafs, they had a game in Montreal on a Thursday night, lost the game. I think it was 3-2 or 4-2. And then afterwards, Ballard goes on the post-game television show with Dick Beddoes. I don't know if you remember him. Anybody remember him? But he used to be on Hockey Night midweek telecasts and Saturdays as well. And he's also a commentator or a columnist for the Globe and Mail. And Ballard tells, this is the announcement that he's firing Roger Nielsen. It was on this post-game thing with Beddoes that Ballard said, Roger Nielsen is fired. And then when we got on the plane, the charter flight back from Montreal to Toronto after the game, Ballard went to Jim Gregory, who was the general manager. He said, well, you go tell Roger he's fired. And so it was on the plane going back that Roger got that word. And to carry on with that, the next day, at that time, I didn't have a regular color commentator on my broadcast on radio in Toronto. And my boss called me the next morning and he said, can you get in touch with Roger Nielsen and ask him if he'd like to be the color commentator for the rest of the season? And so there were about 3 or 4 weeks left in the regular season. So I phoned Roger and he said, sure, I'd like to do that. And but I have to check with the old man. And of course, the old man he was talking about was Ballard. So he anyway, he goes and he calls me back later in that evening. And he says, yeah, it's okay. I'm all set. I'll be there for the game tomorrow night. So I said, okay, I'll meet you at such and such a spot and at such and such a time tomorrow night. So then I went to the morning skate in the morning, and Daryl Sittler was the captain of the team. He was running the practice. There was no coach running the practice there. Jim Gregory was hanging around. And anyway, so the morning skate's over. I go home. And then I get a phone call from Roger at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He said, I can't do the deal with you tonight. I'm coming back as coach, but you can't tell anybody. And so I said, not to worry, I'll keep with the confidence here. But I said, we're advertising on the radio that you're going to be on the show tonight. So maybe I should meet up with you an hour and a half or so before the game and do a recorded interview where you can talk about some of the key points for the Maple Leafs to win the game and that type of thing. So he said, but he got back to me later. He said, well, meet me in Ballard's office. So anyway, I get there and go to the Ballard's office and record this interview. And then we go on, and our pregame show then was only about 10, 15 minutes long. So we had that interview run and then a couple of other things. And then they had the national anthem. And then that's when I announced Roger Nielsen is back as coach of the Maple Leafs. And the other story, and I got this more clarified when I met up with Daryl Sittler back in November when they had the night with for Lanny McDonald at the Saddle Dome that you hosted, Rob. Yep. And Daryl confirmed to me that he was he was badgering Ballard wanted to put a paper bag over the head of Roger Nielsen, have him go out behind the bench just after the national anthem, and then stand there for a minute or so, and then remove the bag over his head. But Daryl finally convinced Ballard that wasn't a very good idea. So, I mean, that's just one of the stories. I mean, we could talk all afternoon about that. So,
well, the problem is
he was quite a guy for sure.
The problem that people are listening to this right now going, "Oh no, you're embellishing it. You're making it up." And you know, we think about everything that happens now, and we go, "Oh my God, this is unprecedented." It's never. Can you imagine, like, straight faced, had a conversation about asking a coach to put a paper bag on his head and go out on the bench? Straight faced. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yep. No question.
Back to the local hockey heroes. Pete, Don Maloney takes over as president of hockey operations and interim general manager. His job is to do the assessment. Don's a capable. I don't think any of us have a problem with Don. He's he's been a GM. He's been a hockey man. He's, soft spoken, but I think a very, very astute gentleman. What about things like exit interviews, Pete? How would those have been handled, or would Treliving have been in on those? What did you hear about player exit interviews?
Yeah, from what I understand, the player interviews that they had last week on Friday, the interviews were conducted at the Saddle Dome individually with each player coming in one time each, and both the Treliving had already told the Flames at that point that he was not coming back. But he was going to be around and be part of the exit interviews because the announcement hadn't been made, blah, blah, blah. Sure. And Don Maloney was also in on those meetings. They were together, and they interviewed each player on an individual basis. Now, this thing, when players go in for these after-season exit interviews, they usually, with the management, they usually only last about 5, maybe 10 minutes. Now, from what I was told from a very good source, some of those lasted longer than an hour. And it took a whole lot longer to go through the entire process that day than it normally would. And from that, what happens when they have those meetings, in this case, Treliving and Maloney would get together. They would talk to John Bean about the things that were discussed there, and then they would discuss with ownership of the Flames hockey team the input that they were getting from the players. Now, what input they were getting from the players, I've got no idea. But as I say, those meetings were a lot longer than they normally are. So then they go to the ownership, and then ownership from there, dissects what they want to take from that, and carry on from there. So I would guess that there were some very frank conversations with regard to Daryl Sutter and his coaching and that type of thing, as well as a whole bunch of other things I'm sure that were discussed at that. And from those exit meetings, the management, the ownership, then can formulate any decisions they want to make or don't want to make with regard to the hockey team. Now, with regard to Daryl Sutter, I have the opportunity of being around Daryl in that run in 03, 04, and the year before that, and then for 5 years after that, when he was coach for one more year after that run, and then was general manager only. Now, to me, Daryl Sutter is a very, very astute hockey coach. Mm-hmm. He is a very, very insightful guy with regard to what's happening in the game, making moves to correct things. If he doesn't see them going right, can make them a lot quicker than a lot of coaches. In fact, I don't know if I mentioned it with you the last time we were on, but in that 04 run, Scotty Bowman was at game number 5 of that series that was in Tampa. And of course, Scotty Bowman is the greatest coach ever in the NHL. And just before game 5, I was talking with Scotty up in the broadcast booth there. And he was telling me, he said, your coach, and he was motioning Daryl, saying that he knows this game and can adjust quicker than any other coach in the NHL today. Yep. And, he said most coaches have to wait until the intermission to make changes and that sort of thing. But he detects them right away and make the proper adjustment. So with regard to Daryl, if you listen to what Daryl has to say with regard to his game planning and that sort of thing, you're going to have success. If you don't listen to him, you're not going to have success. And so, it seemed with watching Flames play this year, they weren't playing Daryl Sutter style hockey as often as they needed to. When you look back at last year when they had the 115 points and finished in first place in the division, they were playing Daryl Sutter style hockey. And that led to, success. Mm-hmm. They won a playoff series and had a series with Edmonton. They didn't win, but at least they were able to get by one round. So, right. But the other part of Daryl, he is a guy that's very, very demanding. Yep. And his commentary with the players is sometimes something that they might not like as players. But if you're being paid to be a player, and if you listen to him, you're going to have success. And you talk to players from that 04 Flame team. That might be a good idea for some media people and ourselves here, Rob, is to talk to some guys like Robin Regier and yep. people like that yep. that were on that team. And, get their comments on Daryl Sutter. And I think you'll find they're going to have a lot of positive comments about the way he coaches the team. They may not have liked some of the things that were said, but they mm-hmm. realized that was all part of gaining the success that the team had. So it certainly is going to be interesting to see what happens eventually with this Flame organization.
No, and you're right, Pete. And it's kind of why I played that Rhett Warner clip at the beginning. Like I think it's real easy to tag everything and say, well, it's Daryl this and Daryl that. I am, and I think I've had this conversation. My question or my critique would come in just the way that I don't think Daryl believes it's his job to develop young players. I don't. And that's probably a holdover from past, but I think the game's changed, and I think he has a responsibility to develop players, young players at the NHL level. That's just the way the contracts work. That's just the way the game has changed. And the only other thing I would say, Pete, is he's blunt, like blunt.
Yeah.
And if you can't take blunt, then you can't be. He's been blunt to me. He's been blunt to you. That's just who he is, right?
Yeah. That's absolutely who he is. But he also has a heart of gold, and I've seen that on many, many occasions. The most recent one was this year. It was soon after that infamous commentary he made on Pelche after he had played his game, and the media asked him how he thought he played, and then Daryl put his glasses on and took out the game sheet and then yelled out to the media, "What number was he?" And then he goes on to say, "Well, he no goals, no assists, -1 or 2, whatever it was, and 5 minutes or 6 minutes of ice time." It was not very complimentary of a young player having played his first NHL game. But
right.
It was about 3 days after that when they had family day, an afternoon game at the Saddle Dome, and they prior to the game they had the son of Chris Snow. His young son, Chris Snow, of course, the assistant general manager, who was dealing with a whole bunch of health issues. But he had his son, who's, I don't know how old he is, 9 or 10, or in that range, had him go in there and read the starting lineup for that game. I mean, and then there was Daryl right behind clapping and all this type of thing. I mean, that's the other side of him that a lot of people don't see, that he has a heart of gold, but it's something that's very rarely seen. We've seen him on both sides, Rob. We've seen the good. We've seen him, be very, very wild and crazy, and I'm saying not crazy, but saying a whole bunch of things that might not be out of line. It might be out of line to some people, but he has a heart of gold when it comes to some other situations. I've also seen him at a whole bunch of charity events and how much influence he has in a positive way in those events. So that's Daryl. And as I say, if you listen to him as a player, you'll have success.
So now Don Maloney goes forth with the general manager search. You were probably on the line when I made my case. How vast a search should this be?
Rob, I think this should be a very extensive search.
Okay.
I know you mentioned Craig Conroy, and I'm in agreement with what you were saying there about Craig, but I think that they should talk to at least a dozen people.
Mm-hmm.
And some within the organization, and a whole lot more outside the organization, and not so much the fact that that they're maybe thinking of hiring so and so that maybe was a general manager with another NHL team and is out of work today, but sit down with these guys, even though if you're not thinking about hiring them, sit down and meet with them and see what they have to say about your team. They may point out some things about your team that you weren't aware of or weren't considering that might be very, very important to the team going forward. There was a very smart general manager once told me, when you're interviewing for a new coach, in this particular case, talk to as many coaches as you can. So, and that's the very reason. You may have the idea in the back of your mind who you want, but talk to these other people to see what their thoughts are about your team, because sometimes that can prove to be very, very helpful. So I think they should do a very, very extensive search, and obviously Craig should be the guy that they talk to and give him ample opportunity to show what he can do. The other interesting aspect of that, like you and I, we've known Craig for a long, long time. His time as a player when he came here on a couple of occasions, then being involved in management for as long as he has been. He's a very, very hardworking, diligent guy. He's a very upfront guy. He's not shy to talk in front of microphones and talk to people. And he's also well organized and that sort of thing. But to know what his contributions have been so far to the Flame organization in his role as assistant general manager that he's had now for all these years, the only real people that know, because it's a behind the scenes job for the most part, the only people that know how his abilities are in that range would be John Bean and Don Maloney and others that have been, active watching what he has been doing. Because when there's trades are made, the general manager is the guy that's always in the forefront. When the draft is on, it's the general manager always in the forefront. When there's a player signing, it's the general manager always in the forefront. You don't see how much work the assistant guy has done behind the scenes and how difficult it may have been for him to haul off this, that, and the other thing. So to me, that's the key aspect with regard to Craig. He definitely, I would be in favor of him being the general manager, but I think those people have a better insight as to his hockey knowledge, his hockey workmanship, and all that type of thing. And I'm sure they have their opinions on that right now. They may have already decided in their own mind he's the guy. Right. But in the same sense, they should interview a whole bunch of different people. I remember when Bill Peters became coach of the Flames, and Brad Treliving made the comment afterwards at the hiring that he didn't interview anybody else for the job. I remember when I heard that, I said, he shouldn't have done that. He should have talked to some more people, even if Bill Peters was the guy he was going to hire. As it turned out, Bill Peters wasn't a very good hire to start with, and he had to leave unceremoniously after a little over a year under the coaching tag. So, to me, that's really important to get as much insight as you can from other people that are in the hockey business about your own team, and that's how you can do it.
Pete, does the coach have any role in this? Not necessarily interviewing or anything like that, but Daryl's got 2 years remaining. My guess is that ownership would like him to stay. When you have a coach, when you're inheriting a coach like that, what's the procedure? What's the role when you're trying to find a general manager?
Okay, before that goes on, Rob, you have to know the general manager has to be in agreement with who the coach is.
Okay.
If the general manager is not in agreement with who the coaches is, it's not going to work. I mean, coaches and general managers, they have to be on the same wavelength. Yes, they can differ in situations. I mean, when you look at it, the general manager's job is about the team today. But he's also going to be looking to the future because it's an ongoing thing with a hockey team. In the coach's range, he's worried about the team today. And so at times there are disagreements between both sides, but they have to be amicable, getting away from that to going about the job of making the team a whole lot better. So usually the way things work, the president should hire the ownership and president. They hire the general manager. The general manager then usually hires the coach. So in this particular case, if Daryl is going to be staying as coach of the team, and he has the 2 years remaining on his contract, whoever they hire through the interview process, they have to make it very clear Daryl's going to be the coach. And what are your thoughts on Daryl? Can you work with Daryl? Can you do this with Daryl? And then, of course, once you've made your decision, maybe you get down to 2 or 3 people. Maybe you can go to Daryl and say, we've got this guy, this guy, this guy that we're considering for the job. Do you have any comment? And not that he makes the final decision, but he can give you a hint on, whether or not think the 2 people, the GM and the coach can get together on a good-natured basis and make the team better. So, I mean, those are all things that they really have to consider, when they're getting this hiring done, because it's a very important hire. The team, the fans right now are all up in disarray. They're not happy with the team. And so they have to do the right thing, get the right people here and get this team back on track.
I agree with you, Pete.
And you also have to wonder, we talk about the exit meetings. They had the exit meetings with management, and then of course when they had the exit meetings with media after the players come in and have their the final say with the owner management, then a lot of them meet with the media, or most of them, I guess, met with the media. And it seemed from the comments that were being made by Michael Backlund and Elias Lindholm that then their contracts run out after next season, not the one that's upcoming. After that, their contracts are up. And they seem to indicate they're not staying here. And if that's the case, then they've got to look into that as a very serious nature and get something in return for them, or get whatever situation that they have as a problem straightened out, because those are your top 2 centers on the team. I mean, Kadri could be your top 2 center as well. I thought he had a great first half of the season, then kind of tailed off at the second. So, but those are all things that have to be considered here as they move forward with this situation. And it was very surprising to have those guys make those kind of comments at their closing sessions with media. They probably said that to the management as well when they met with Treliving and Maloney. But normally they don't say that in public. Normally, I remember a former trainer with the Flames saying to me one time, what the players are saying sometimes to the media is just what they're supposed to be saying, not necessarily what they really mean. And so, but those guys were pretty frank, basically, about what their thoughts were on going forward with this team. So, if they're not going to be back, then they've got to move them here in the summer so they get something back for them, rather than get themselves in a situation like they had with Johnny Gaudreau last summer.
Well, Pete, you're right. You and I have done this a lot. We've been to a lot of green garbage bag days. I'm not sure if I was more surprised by the comments of Lindholm and Backlund, or more surprised by Weegar going after the building, because traditionally Flames players do not talk about that.
Yeah,
it's not that they don't think that. I don't want anybody to think that it's all rosy, but that's one area that they've generally avoided.
Yes,
right?
Definitely. I think, he made some very nice, very interesting comments, and very, to me, important comments with the way things are going with regard to that arena situation.
Agreed. Let's leave. It feels like it was a month ago, but it was really 1 week ago, the final game of the year. Pete, I always like to lean on you because I think we get excited and caught up, but you have the right kind of temperament on things. Game 82, you're out of the playoffs. Dustin Wolf gets in, Matt Coronado gets in. I know there wasn't a lot to be happy about, but there seemed to be a lot of excitement about these two young guys. Exactly how excited should we be in a game 82 against a team like San Jose?
Rob, if it weren't for those two guys, I wouldn't have watched that game. But now to put
okay, fair enough.
But to put that in perspective, I go back to a comment a coach made to me a number of years ago. Mm-hmm. He said, never fall in love with a young hockey player that's playing in a game at the end of the regular season that means nothing, or is playing in a preseason game in September. Because you fall in love with a player then, he might break your heart in October. Right. His whole point was that these games don't mean a whole lot. If they stand out, it's great. It's great, but it's not something to get overly excited about. If they don't stand out in the game, then you're getting a little bit of a read that these guys need more work. But you can't really tell from that one instance or one game that these guys are ready to come in and be top players in the NHL. Now, I thought both Wolf and Coronado played really strong games. I mean, they had lots of energy. Wolf made some really great saves to get the victory, and Coronado made a number of great plays. He was always in the mix and that type of thing. But to me, I don't get excited about those guys now. If they can come back, do that through training camp and the exhibition games that we're talking about, and if they do that, then I'm sure they'll be in the lineup at some point. But then is when you really can tell whether or not these guys are ready for the NHL and come up and be guys that are going to be star players for your team. But it was a good positive start for both of those guys getting their first look at NHL play, and so we'll see now where it goes when training camp comes. I think we're going to have a younger Flame team next year than the one we had this past season. And having said that, that means that you've got those two guys and maybe Pelche and maybe a couple of other younger guys making their way into the lineup for this team.
Well, give us a little historical context here, Peter. As we're doing this, our outstanding producer Gavin just piped in. So, not surprising that Wolf was named AHL Goalie of the Year for the second consecutive year, but this is just his second year in the AHL. Pete, this is now 4 straight years that Dustin Wolf has been the goalie of the year in his league. Twice in the Western League in 1920, and now the last 2 in the American Hockey League. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible what this young man has done.
No question about that. I remember watching. I'm sorry, I wasn't watching. I remember hearing about when he was drafted by the Flames. The second day of the draft, was it round 7? Was it? Or
he was the 4th to final pick, Pete. There was only 3 guys picked after him.
And he was I think he was the only guy left in the building, a player that was left in the building at that particular point in time there with his parents. Can you imagine? He was sitting there through all of the draft procedures one day, and then the second day not having his name called, and then suddenly having his name called. And, I remember hearing about that and showing when they showed it on TV afterwards. I got a chance to see the highlights of it. I'm thinking, boy, that's incredible for this guy. So And then at that time, they talked about how great he had played in the Western Hockey League. Then he went on for another great year there, and then 2 great years now in the American League. And he's got the American League playoffs coming up here, in which he's going to be a key factor in whether or not the Wranglers can have themselves a great playoff run here to get the city a little bit excited about playoff hockey here. But yeah, he's just phenomenal what this kid has accomplished. Now, the only knock that you hear about him is that he's too small. But he certainly was able to cover all the angles in the game that he played, that last game of the regular season last week. So, and as you say, he's been able to show that right through the American League. Now, stopping puck regularly in the NHL is a bit different than the AHL, but he's certainly on the right course. And you have to think that he's going to get an opportunity to show what he can do at the NHL level next year. Now, having that being said, you've got 2 goalies under contract that are here for next year. And so what are you going to do with that? Now, Markstrom, I don't think he's movable.
I don't either.
Not with his contract that he has, the term that's left on it, and the fact he's coming off such a bad year. He needs to definitely bounce back. Now, the other guy, they may be able to, he may be able to make a small trade to get him to another team. You're not going to get a whole big return back, but to make room for Wolf, that may be something they'll do during the offseason.
Well, we've got Brent Krahn coming up next, and
he's the guy to talk about goals.
Well, that's exactly it, right? We're going to have him on, and I just want to point out too that Mitch Love, the head coach of the Wranglers, back-to-back Coach of the Year. So there's stuff happening there. Like the young defenseman Jeremy Poirier is made the all-rookie team. Connor Zeri's had a really quiet season. Like there's Walker Doers out of that program. Like there's some reasons to be optimistic. In a way, Brad Treliving's left you in a really good place. 2 more for you, Pete. One has to do with the Wranglers. Safe to say, I think, after all of those years of almost nobody watching them in Stockton, nobody caring in Stockton, and some of the really, bad dates they got this year. There were some midweeks that didn't draw well. I think this team's going to get a lot of fan support. I think the Dome's going to be humming to watch this Wrangler team in the postseason.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rob. But it's unfortunate that their crowds weren't, really, really great during the regular season. But as you mentioned, selection of dates is a key element. And when you've got the Flames playing in there, they're going to get all the prime dates. That's normal. And then you have the Hitmen that have been there for years. And, they also have the Roughnecks that play in there. So it's tough getting dates that are going to be prime to get big crowds in there. And, of course, you're the American League team, you're the farm team. So that, that has a significance as well. But now that the Flame season is over, the Hitman season is over, and the Wranglers are there and in a playoff spot where they're very much a favorite to have themselves a run into the playoffs. I'm like you. I think this is going to generate a whole lot of playoff excitement. Whether or not they can get 18 or 19,000 people in that building, I don't know about that, but they certainly should be able to, get up about 9, 10, or 12,000 people to watch this team, especially if they get a whole bunch of wins going and, win a series and it continues on from that. I don't think it'll get to be the Sea of Red, and the excitement in the city that we would have if the Flames are getting into 1 or 3 or 4 rounds. But I think it's going to be something that's going to generate hockey people here and create a fever for the Wranglers.
But if I remember correctly, Pete, a couple of those long runs by the Hitmen, towards the end of them, the crowds were really big, right? And they were great. They got, definitely. Yep. Right. Yeah. 19 years ago today, remember where you were?
19 years ago today. Rob, usually I know where I was on significant days, but I have to refresh my memory.
Well, hold on. I'm worried I might be wrong on this then. Is today not the 19th anniversary of Game 7 in Vancouver?
Oh, might very well be. Yeah. Yes, that could very well be the night that the Flames won Game 7, a series that they weren't supposed to win. Yeah. Now that you mention it, and thinking here, that was an interesting game.
Walk me through the last minute, Pete. What can you remember about that last minute?
Oh, well, it was Ginla getting the penalty, and then the hacks all go, or the fans, the hacks, everything going, a bunch of stuff going on, and then Mark Angelo now moving in and getting a goal to tie it, the Flames getting the goal from McGinley to tie it, and then going into overtime and winning it on the goal by Martin Chalana that started a string of him getting the game-winning or series-winning goal in 4 straight series, although they didn't count the last one. But yeah, that was a real interesting night that night. It looked like it was not going to be a success for a bit there, and going into that closing part. And all of a sudden, it turned around to the chagrin of the fans there in Vancouver. Who were
it was Matt Cook Matt Cook tied it right for the Canucks.
Yeah.
And if I remember, it was Ginla going down the ice, and a sweatshirt got tossed. He had the empty net, and then he was coming back, and there was a stick, and he tripped over that. And then Vancouver ties it with 6 seconds, and Jovanovski's in the bench, and he's going ballistic. And then they go to overtime. And I remember being at Shanks South with Roger Millions was our analyst, and it just felt like, oh my God, all the air had left. Vancouver, it's inevitable now. The Canucks will win. And on that same Jovanovski power play or penalty, that power play for the Flames, that series, Pete, that series taught me so much about hockey. I remember when Johan Hedberg got in, he played for Vancouver, and he could handle the puck, Pete. He was going to change the whole complexion of the series because he could handle the puck. Right?
Yep, exactly. Yep. Now that's bringing back the memory. Yeah, that was a real memorable night.
Yeah, it was fun. Not as much fun as the next series. I've never asked you this, Pete, but now with a little distance, could we enjoy one series more than the next, or do you have to kind of enjoy the 7 games against Tampa because that was the Stanley Cup final? Because that Detroit series, I mean, Calgary winning it in 6, the way they won it, Dave Lowry coming back, Mika Kiprasov, like that in many ways was one of if you're watching a team, that was maybe the best I've ever seen result-wise and play-wise for the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, Rob, going into that playoff series, nobody gave the Flames a chance to win. I mean, I don't think many gave them a chance to win against Vancouver either, but against Detroit, I mean, that Detroit team was a powerful team. I forget how many points they had during the regular season, but they actually dominated the entire league. They had all kinds of future Hall of Famers in their lineup, and they were supposed to win that series easily against the Flame team that got into the playoffs with 2 days left on the regular schedule. But the Flames battled their way hard, went into Detroit, won games there, came back, and then won that game 6 in the Saddle Dome. And the thing I remember from that is that when Marty Chalana scored the goal to win the 6th game in overtime to clinch the series, I yelled out 3 yeah babies to celebrate the occasion. And then I remember coming down after the game, going down to the Flame dressing room, doing an interview with Marty, and I think you were in the studio and replayed my broadcast of that goal. And at that time, when I heard the 3 babies, I said, "Oh no, that's terrible."
He did, folks.
I think I said that live on the air.
You absolutely did. Absolutely, you said that. Absolutely. Are you going to tell the rest of the story?
Yeah. And then I went home after that. I couldn't sleep. And I get up the next morning, and the first thing I did was go down to the Saddle Dome. And I went to Daryl Sutter's office, knocked on the door, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And so I went in, sat down, and I said, "Look, I want to apologize for being so excited when Marty scored that goal last night to clinch the series. They're yelling out 3 yeah babies. 1 yeah baby would have been sufficient. Winning the second round of the playoff series is not enough for 3 yeah babies." And so he's looked at me and gave me a dirty look. And I thought maybe he's going to start yelling at me. And then all of a sudden he got a smile on his face and he said, "Yeah, I heard it on the radio this morning. That was awesome." So that made me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, but you've also told the story, Pete, that in many ways that was a release valve for 7 years and all of the Save the Flames campaign and all of that. Like it just, the Vancouver series was great, but it was a juggernaut. It was Shanahan and Yzerman and Lindstrom and Brett Hull and Hatcher and 2 guys that I don't know if we ever heard of. Datsuk and Zetterberg were on that team, and their best was ahead of them. That should have been over in 4. And there's a story about Daryl too, right? Because wasn't there a whole bunch of headlines of sweep and things like that. And Daryl kind of used that as motivation too.
Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, he did. Yep. Yep. Because he got all of those clippings from somehow media people or the PR people got a hold of all of those, and he had them plastered on the wall.
Yeah,
telling his team they're telling us we have no chance in this series, or basically saying to the guys, let's go out and show them different. And so,
and
but yeah, that was all part of the motivation that was used in the dressing room by Coach Daryl Sutter to have that team go on and upset the Red Wings in that series, and a dramatic upset. There's no doubt about it in my mind.
And lots of stories from 04, Pete. And I promise I'll end it here. But, Commodore, the double doors, Matador, all of those things. But to me, it always come down to Pie, that Dave Lowry was coaching and was secretly working, and then came back in that series and was such a heart and soul guy. And I just remember, nobody epitomized what the Calgary Flames were that year more than Dave Lowry.
That's right. Yo, absolutely. No question about that. That was quite a story for him to be behind the bench 1 minute, and the next thing you know, he's out there in an important game playing a very key role in the team picking up a victory. But, you mentioned Steve Matador there, and that brings me back to something I'm very thankful for him, the late Steve Matador. In the next series, the Western Conference Final against San Jose, game number 1 of that series was in San Jose. And so I was fighting a cold going into that game. And so the game went through 3 periods. It was tied. It went to overtime. And the overtime period lasted almost 19 minutes or 18 minutes or whatever it was. And so I'm broadcasting. I can barely get the words out of my mouth because the cold is having that big an effect on my vocal cords. And Mike Rogers, who was the color commentator, he knew what was going on. So every time I'd stop, he'd jump in and say something. And then, of course, finally, Steve Matador scored the goal to give the Flames the win. And I got a shot of adrenaline, I guess, and made the yell that Flames won the game and had a 1-0 lead in the series, got all excited with that. So, but that's not the key. That's important, because if he hadn't scored that goal and they had to go to another overtime, I might not have been able to talk if they'd gone to another overtime period. And then after that, I go downstairs to the Flame dressing room to do the post-game interview as normal. And, of course, Steve Matador is the guy I want to talk to. So by the time I got downstairs, then I could barely get a word out of my mouth because, my vocal cords had tightened up because I hadn't used them for 10 minutes. So Matador comes out, and right away he realizes I've got a problem. And I remember introducing him on there, and right away he took the microphone and he talked for 5 straight minutes about the goal, the game, and all the other stuff that was going on with the team. And I'm so ever thankful for Steve Matador, first for ending that game and then handling that interview the way that he did, because it saved me from some embarrassing moments. And again, we certainly miss him because he was a real character kind of guy.
He was the best. And I talk about the fact that I was doing those games on the radio from Shanks, and I'll never forget the beaver tail, because you could hear it over the crowd. It was so loud. Ginla has the puck, and here's this 8th, 9th defenseman coming up the ice, banging it. Give it to me. And Monty scored. Pete, what's your secret when you have a sore throat? What do you do that helps you when you have a sore throat?
Oh yes. Well, when I have that situation of with the cold or sore throat, I take a couple of sips of vinegar, and usually what I do about 5 minutes before the start of the game, I would take that, and then I would take it again at the end of the second period. Now I would always the key with that is that it doesn't solve anything with regard to curing having a cold or having a sore throat. But what it does, it clears away the mucus that are in there that allows you to talk. And so whenever I have that situation, I use that. And where I got that tip was one year, Anne Murray, the famous Canadian singer, was performing here in Calgary. And I got the opportunity to meet her at the Westin Hotel here in Calgary. She was performing, I believe, at one of the auditoriums here in the city that night. And somehow, I don't know how it happened, but anyway, the people knew that I liked Anne Murray because she was a Maritimer.
I was just going to say, there's the Maritime, yes.
So we get in there, and so in the 10-minute conversation I had with her, At one point, I asked her, "What do you do when you have to perform, and you have a cold or you have a sore throat or whatever?" And that's when she told me about the vinegar. And so ever since then, I've been doing that in that type of situation, although I haven't had any for a while. But I do pass that on. I passed it on to you. I passed it on to several other people. And
I couldn't do it. I tried it, Pete. I couldn't do it because you took what, 4 or 5 sips, right?
Yeah, 4 or 5 sips. I mean, it tastes terrible.
Oh.
And it stays on you for a few minutes after you do it.
Oh.
But hey, you got to get the job done. So.
I remember I could not, and you probably remember, I asked you one time, so I gargle this. No, you sip it. No, I gargle it. Nope, you sip it. And I looked at you dumbfounded, and I've tried it. And folks, if you want to have a little fun, try taking 4 or 5 sips of vinegar. And then you would do that 3 times, right? Pre, first, and second?
Yeah, well, sometimes I would wait until the end of sometimes I wouldn't do it at the first intermission. Sometimes I'd just wait to the second, depending on how it was reacting at that point. So, another interesting, I passed that along to the Hitmen were in the playoffs one year, and I was down there one morning or wherever, and the play-by-play, I forget who the guy was. From Saskatoon. Red-headed guy.
Yeah, I know exactly. Les Lazarick.
Yes, Les Lazarick. He had a cold. And so I'm mentioning to him, take some vinegar. And so I went through the process of how we should do it and that type of thing. So anyway, I'm at the game that night. So I happened to go up into the broadcast area there. And in the second period, I think it was, I go in there and I just happened to go by where his booth was. And he has, those little vinegar packets that you can get. He had a whole bunch of those that were already open that he'd already taken. One of them would have been, half of one of them would have been enough.
Oh, Les.
But he was able to, he finished the period, and I was talking to him, don't take too much of that stuff. But he got through the game. So when I saw all those packets that were just beside him on his table there, I said, gosh, he shouldn't have taken that many. But anyway, but that's what happened there. So,
well, here's my attempt at Ron McLeanism. We started with Harold Ballard. We end with vinegar, sweet to sour. That's how this one goes. Pete, I really appreciate this. We've had unbelievable response. We got lots and lots of live viewers right now, and all I saw were, "I love Pete, I love ya, baby," and they love you. They want to hear more of you. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks, and hopefully by then maybe we'll have a little Flames news. But we didn't even get into the playoffs. They've started. We didn't even get into that. Right?
You never know where we'll be in 2 weeks, Rob.
You never
but I look forward to having a chat. What the subjects will be, we'll leave that to others to plant them for us.
Here's the one projection. At some point, you will reference a Maritimer. At some point in the conversation, a Maritimer will be referenced.
Always have to get that in there, Rob.
You have to. Love you, bud. Thanks for
doing this. Never forget where you're from.
No. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Peter.
All right.
Oh, Peter Marr, everybody. Courtesy of Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years. 3 locations: McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue Southwest, just off of 14th Street, Bow Ridge Road Northwest by McDonald's. By the way, they got great deals right now. And for hockey players, check out their snow skating. Go in there and ask them about snow skating. There you go. Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. Next week, or on Friday, I should say, Eric Dehachek will join us live in studio. On Monday, Chevy and Nasty live in studio. And Wednesday, speaking about dusting off the classics, Bruce Dobiggin, everybody. Bruce Dobiggin in studio. That's what you call a show right there. This is a show. This is what you call a show right here. Because when we get to our next guest, we're not going downhill. This roller coaster keeps going up. We're live in the Oodle Noodle studio. Local, love, delicious. Since opening their first store back in 2005, Oodle Noodle has been all flavor and just the right amount of weird. 2 locations: 1244 17th Avenue Southwest, 105 Main Street North in Airdrie. Pickup and delivery. We go from one legend to yet another legend. As we welcome in a good friend of the program, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. I would go out on a limb and suggest that the next guest, second only to Craig Conroy in terms of interviews that I have performed in my career here in Calgary, and he's always been a favorite, and I'm buying him some time because apparently he screwed something up. Former first-round pick of the Calgary Flames, former star of the Calgary Hitmen, and just one of the all-round good dudes. And you know what, Calgary, you're welcome, because I'm pretty sure I'm the guy that got him going on this side. You know him, you love him from everywhere. Brent Krahn's here. How are you?
You know what? I'm great. I skated at noon today.
Yes. As a goalie?
As a goalie, I got nothing to offer.
Nothing to offer.
As a forward.
Okay.
I can't skate.
Right.
I can't do a left crossover. I was at the office this morning, and there was a coworker of mine. His kids are in, development camps and spring hockey, and he's asking me, hey, Grant, you got any, power instructors? It's hard to find the right guy. There's so many people out there. And I said, listen, I can't even do a left crossover. So I'm not going to guide your young child
on their journey.
Right. But no, I'm feeling great. I'm happy to be here. And you know what, speaking of which, you said that you did give me my start. I used to come in the summertime once and sit in an afternoon, and we'd have a great time in that old studio way back in the Northeast. And I was just telling the boys in the back, it was funny. I remember I was having I think I was injured again at training camp with the Flames. Daryl was coaching. This is, I think, probably 06 or something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
And, I was pretty down the dumps, and you were there, you were listening. And I said, you know what, Rob, I said, what would it, what does it take to get into media post career? And I remember it was the worst timed conversation because I was really curious. But Daryl just walked around the corners. I was like, so, once hockey's done, I'd like to get into, the media at some point. And he gave me the largest horse eye that I've ever seen in my life. I was like, oh, and I wanted to say something like, no, I don't mean it right now. But I just, I swallowed and I gulped and I was like, right, back to the minors for me.
I can't remember the number of times I would have called you in Lowell, Quad City.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The number of times we'd have conversations because we were all of the opinion, well, it's, here comes Brent. Right?
Only a matter of time.
It's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
You would be an all-star in the American Hockey League and, you'd be player of the week and all. Well, Kipper's here.
Yeah.
But here,
yeah.
Right? Here's the heir apparent.
Yes. You know what? I remember even having a conversation, my first actually legit call up, not in Dallas. It was my first kind of really big.
You were never called up in.
I was, but it was, Roman Turk had a concussion and training camp had just ended.
Yeah.
And so they called me up. And then one time, I think Turk was still battling with his concussion, and Jamie McLennan had a cracked sternum.
That's correct.
Right?
Yep.
And they called me up.
When Kiprusoff was hurt too.
He had a knee, like the
both
ACL.
Turk and Kiprusoff, because wasn't Sabarin up?
Yes, he was. And then I don't know, I can't remember exactly what happened to him, why he wasn't called up, or maybe they just, nobody was going to play, so we'll just get Sabby back in the American League. I think I was in the East. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
But I remember getting called up, and I was so excited because I'm like, you know what? Everybody's dying up here. I'm going to get
It's only a matter of time.
And I remember Noodle's coming to me, and he's like, I may not make it through the whole game. So like, I have a broken chest. Like my sternum is fractured, and
which is a completely true story.
Yes, 1,000,000%. And you know how much guys love playing with Noodles as far as he's like the iconic backup goaltender ever.
Right.
Person, player. And I felt bad saying, I hope that he can't, because I just want a chance. And he got a shutout. We played the Oilers, and we won 1-0 with a cracked sternum. And I'm like, if my chance isn't now, I don't know ever if it will ever come. This man is a half a human being, and he's still getting played over me, which turns out to be the right choice. You can't argue, but
no. Well, that was craziness.
Yeah,
because then he gets punted.
Yeah, gone like that.
Thanks for coming. Oh, you're the Rangers now.
Yeah,
and that was the second coming of Roman Turek.
Yes,
because everybody had ridden Roman Turek off, and then Kiprusoff came back, and all I remember is Roman would get the odd start, and he'd win.
Yes. And he loved it too.
Oh, sure he did.
Like he loved it. I remember him. So they traded Jamie McLennan and Blair Betts to New York for Chris Simon.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And so
Blair Betts, holy cow.
Right. Betts was awesome. Like,
absolutely.
I love that guy. He blocking shots, penalty kill specialist, did absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And then when Kip came and just kind of took the whole net over, and Roman was just so relaxed. and easy going. He took a pay cut too. They restructured his deal. He's like, yeah, sure.
He's happy.
Yeah. And then he'd go in, he'd play 1 every 8, and he'd play great. And it was just, that dynamic was unbelievable because Kip played every game and Roman come in for comedic relief and play great.
Do you remember the towel?
No.
The towel? Roman Turk's towel with the sun on it. He had, because everybody's issued a team towel.
Yeah.
Except Roman Turk. He had his favorite beach towel with the big sun on it. And it was hanging in his stall, and he put it around his, and it was just like,
that is awesome.
Oh yeah. No.
I remember that there being something with the towel, but I don't remember what. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
He was I remember talking to him in the summertime too. Not talking to summertime. We get to training camp. And he'd be like, hey, Croner, how was your summer? I go, oh, good. Large, how was yours? Oh, good. He goes, did you work out? I said, yeah, no, I was with Rich Hesketh this summer, putting me through the paces. I broke his bike pedals. I think we were doing some kind of training with Rich, and I was a little bit heavier set. So he was bagging me pretty good, and I ended up breaking his bike. So long story short, we're kind of going through the whole rigmarole. I'm like, so what did you do for the summer? Like, what did you do? And he's like, I walked my dog for 45 minutes on Mondays. I'm like, I couldn't, I thought he was joking, right? I was just like, great. That's ha ha ha. That's so funny. And then just kind of left it open-ended and walked away. And I'm like, he seems like a guy that probably could walk his dog for 45 minutes and call it a day.
So what was Kipper's off season? Like cutting down to 1 pack of smokes?
Yeah.
Just before camp or something?
Fishing.
He was fishing.
Switching to light beer.
Yeah. Light beer and half a pack of smokes a week before camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, he was, you'd see him and you could never tell he was a professional athlete. You'd see him walking around. He kind of had a little slight upper body with a little miniature, kind of skinny fat, the old, the boiler on him, skinny little legs. And then he'd get out there and he was the best athlete on the ice. And I thought that was quite remarkable. I thought that there's hope for me yet.
Yeah, it still is. For both of us. Exactly. I don't know why you're limiting it to just you.
Right.
I think both of us have, based on the Mika Kiprusoff workout regimen.
Yeah.
Right. Now, having said that, in fairness to him, there's legendary stories about his stretching.
Oh, that was kind of going through my mind.
Yeah.
As I said that, the guy was, the routine that he would have before games was just, and the things that he could do. And man, I have flexible. Well, this is kind of probably too much information. My groins are super flexible, and my joints, my knees, my shoulder, they've all been super flexible to the point where they would dislocate. Like I've been a naturally flexible person.
Yeah.
But what I was always blown away by with Kiprusoff was his hips. It was like he could just spin his legs out. I could never do that. You see the goalies now where, even a guy like Markstrom, they can go in the butterfly, their left skate is against the post and their right skate's against the post, and it's just completely flush.
Right.
I could never do that.
No.
My hips would never flare out like that. And I saw Kip do it. I'm like, how do you do that? I would try to get some type of flexibility, and I wouldn't even come close to that. I would talk to trainers like, hey, how do I do that? And like, if you can either do it or you can't. You can get a little bit more here or there, but you're not doing that.
We just had Peter Marr on. We believe it's 19 years ago today, Game 7 against Vancouver in the run.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. I got called up for that too.
Because you were the Black Ace.
Black Ace. And it was so funny because I remember we were in San Antonio. I was playing, I got loaned out to Florida.
Yeah.
Rick Dudley was the GM.
Yeah.
And Dwayne Sutter was the one of the scouts or whatever, player personnel guys for the Panthers. And I remember after the game in San Antonio, I'd never met Dwayne Sutter before. And he comes up to me and he punches me in the stomach. Not like that's ever happened before, I can imagine.
From a Sutter.
Yeah, right. Shocking. Completely blew me away. And he's like, oh, it's the first save you made all day. And I'm like,
from a Sutter.
Right. I'm like, who are you? What's going on here? And he's like, hey, pack your stuff up. You're going up to the big team. And you're going to be the Black Ace for the Flames for the playoff run. And I'm like, because they were already, I think they had just finished game 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So then I literally had to pack all my belongings, fly from San Antonio to Las Vegas because that's where I had the rest of my stuff, and that's where my vehicle was because I was playing on the East Coast.
Right. For the Wranglers.
For Wranglers, yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely. Right. So I pack all my stuff up, and then I hop in my truck, and then I drive up to Calgary.
Was Glenn Gulletson the coach?
Of the Wranglers, yes. Yeah. That was his first coaching gig. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of weird.
It's nostalgia. Yeah.
Right?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so I get into Calgary for game I want to say, actually, I think it was game 6.
Yeah, the greatest loss in the history of the Calgary Flames.
Right, but game 6 of the first round against.
No, that's the greatest loss. Remember, they were down 4-1.
Oh yes,
And they came back.
Yes.
BMO scored in triple overtime.
You're right.
Vancouver.
Yes, you're 100% right. I remember I just got in at like 4:30, 5 o'clock, and my fiance, well, it's obviously my wife now, but I hopped in the truck. They got us 2 tickets. I wasn't even in the press box. I was just like, so we go sit in the stands, we watch the game, and then the next day and then I'm not even on the team flight the next day. They got me a flight, like a regular commercial flight
So
to
you
Vancouver.
didn't get to fly in the charter to Vancouver?
I check into the Westin Hotel downtown, and I get in like super late.
Yeah.
And the team had already kind of, I don't know, I just grabbed my card and I said, hey, any chance you know who my roommate is? Like, oh yeah, it's Chris Simon. I'm like, oh, whoa, this is like, I was so jacked, but I'm like, okay, well, this should be interesting. So I go check into my room. And it's perfectly clean. There's nothing in there. There's no luggage. There's no nothing. And I'm exhausted. It's 2.5, 3 days of travel. It's just been a kind of a whirlwind. And all I want to do is sleep.
Sure.
And it's 11 o'clock. And I'm sitting in a chair because I'm too afraid to choose a bed. It's like, which one does,
because it'll be the wrong one.
Right, for sure. Right.
Yeah,
It's like veteran. Okay, so he gets first pick. You just take the scraps.
Yeah.
So I'm literally sitting in those uncomfortable hotel chairs. I got TV on and I'm like nodding off and I'm just, and I'm like, finally I was so out of it. I'm like, I don't care if he comes in here and beats the wheels off of me. I got to go to bed. So I hop in bed, shut her down, and I wake up in the morning. There's nothing, like nothing.
It's
like,
your own room.
It's my own room. Like, what is going on? Because pregame skate was that morning for game 7.
Sure.
So I get up and have breakfast with, I think Brendan Evans was there and Lynn Loins and Commodore and Martin Sonnenberg and just going down memory lane.
The heroes of 04, right?
Yeah. Montador, Commodore. We were all kind of in that Black Ace category, right? And then I'm sitting down at breakfast and this giant bear's paw just comes from behind and grabs me on my right shoulder and just crushes my right shoulder. And I turn around and it's Chris Simon. I stand up like, Mr. Simon, hey, Brent Krahn, nice to meet you. I apologize. I didn't know which room to take. And he starts laughing. He goes, I know you had a long day of travel. He goes, I don't sleep well at night. So I just told the lady at the front desk to get you your own room so you can catch up on some rest.
He did that for you.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? I was terrified. I was, just basically crapping myself because I'm like, this guy's playing. I'm screwing up his routine. He doesn't want to room with a third string goaltender.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he would pick me up for practices and he'd take me to the airplane, all that kind of stuff.
That's amazing.
It blew me away. It was just the coolest thing ever. It was awesome.
So what do you remember of game 7 in Vancouver? Where were you? Were you upstairs?
So, no, I wasn't upstairs. I was in the dressing room, watched it the whole time. Okay. And I remember Gus Thorson, the trainer, I think it was 2-1 for Calgary, a few minutes remaining.
Yeah.
So him and Les Jarvis were pulling out all the bags.
Yep.
Right. So the game's over, guys. They're not going to score. Game's over. So we're putting all the bags in front, pulling them out, all of us. And then Vancouver scored with like
6 seconds.
Yeah. And everybody's like, and just freaking out. We got to get these bags back in here. So like all of us full on board,
sprint,
grabbing the bags, jamming them in the stalls, and then basically hiding in the hallway to get out of the dressing room. Right. Wow. And that's all I really remember. I don't remember Jelena scoring. Actually, no, that's not true. I do remember him scoring on Ald when Ald was kind of in the pad stack. And then I remember that. But I saw it on TV. I wasn't actually in the press box looking down. I saw it like everybody else did in the dressing room. It's crazy.
It was, and I don't know how much you remember about Vancouver, but that was Kluche gets hurt.
Yep.
Ald, Johan Hedberg.
Yep.
Was in it. And that was the one to this day, it was the craziness of the Vancouver media. Oh, Johan Hedberg's changing the series. He handles the puck.
Yeah.
He's going to change the whole complexion of the series. They blew his freaking doors off. He was one and done.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
and then they turned to Alex Ald.
And Ald wasn't that bad. He actually
he wasn't that bad. He didn't cost them.
No.
That team should have scored.
Absolutely.
But Kiprusoff was the difference. Right?
And then they had Naslund and Bertuzzi and Matthias Oland, and they had, I think Jovanovski was there.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
The Sedin.
Yeah. The Sedins were secondary at that point.
Yeah,
though.
they were.
That was still the West Coast Express, right?
Yeah. Agreed.
Agreed. Bertuzzi was suspended, but Naslund and that.
Yeah. No, it was crazy. And that was kind of the start of it. And it was just a whirlwind, and then started practicing with the team, obviously, and doing a bunch of other things and whatever. And then that year, for being a Black Ace, though, too, was you were actually kind of incorporated on the team. Like I was on the ice while the players were practicing, right?
Yeah.
So Kiprusoff would kind of take what he needed, and then it was headshots for Krahn, and guys would lick their chops, and Dion Phaneuf and Oleg Saprik, and like, let's practice one-timers from the face-off dot. And it's like just cracking off my mask and shoulder. And I remember, I think Elliot Friedman was still just getting his feet wet at CBC. And I had a white goalie mask, and I had played on, I started in Vegas.
Yep.
then I went to Lowell in the American League, then back to Vegas, and back to Lowell, and back to Vegas, then loaned out to Florida, and ended up in San Antonio. So I remember getting to the team that year, and then they were saying, you don't get any colors because you got the Wranglers colors, you got Lowell, who's like purple and red, and then you got the Flames. So it was white and black equipment, and then the white helmet, and that was it. And I remember Elliot, I don't know if he even put it on air, but they were taking shots of all my equipment, like just basically the journeyman goaltender that's just played on tried to play in every team in every league this season.
Yeah. No, it's for me, I don't know about for you, but there's stuff that happens after that, years after that feels further away. For whatever reason, that 03-04 run, it just still feels like yesterday in so many cases.
It's crazy. I remember getting pulled over just outside of Moose Jaw or Regina on the way to Calgary, and the cop pulled me over, and I was trying to be, Bobby Bigwee. I'm like, don't give me a ticket. And I was just, hey, like, playing hockey. Daryl Sutter called me and said, I gotta. Yeah. So, you can give me the ticket. It's fine, but you're going to have to answer to somebody. Right? And he just looked at me like, you're an idiot, and just get out of my province and carry on.
Well, the one thing I do remember about you was, and like, I can't imagine it would ever happen today. Maybe I'm wrong, but was the reception downtown after Game 7, right? You guys went in City Hall and you came out wearing white hats, and like there was 25,000 people.
It's crazy.
It was insane.
It was unbelievable.
And you were just soaking it all in, right?
Well, and I was there, and then they had to introduce me too.
Yeah.
And it was like, yay.
Yeah. It's like, I know exactly what you're talking about, because it was Beasley and Peter Marr.
Yeah.
I introduced them, and they came out and they were introducing everybody, and Kiprasov and Aginla and Conroy, and Brent Krahn,
and he plays hockey too. It's
swear to God he does. Swear to God he's on this team.
I'm like, don't, like, what? I can sit in the stands here too, but it was crazy. The city was electric. It was unbelievable.
And you can understand. Like, I don't want to make an inappropriate. But you understand why you chase that high, right? Like, you want to go back to, and that's why, for the first couple years afterwards, it's like, the Red Mile start. Yeah. And it was almost like they got the Red Mile ahead of everything.
For sure.
Right.
Because it was chaos. It was mayhem. It was excitement. It was passion. It was, the town had been dry for so long that in terms of hockey, that this is the excuse everybody needs to just let loose and enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
And it hasn't really been, now subsequently, everybody kind of hopes and has their fingers crossed for another run like that, just to keep the city going. Right. And
you did back up in a playoff game, didn't you?
Yeah. Playing against Detroit.
Yeah.
That was hilarious, because that's when Jamie McLennan, once again, I think smashed his stick into
he chased him behind the net.
What was his name? Holmstrom. It was Holmstrom for Detroit.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the game, because we were actually in playoffs, like playing against the Dallas Stars farm system, the Iowa Stars, and Mike Smith and Dan Ellis were the goalies for that team. It was me and Curtis McElhinney.
Yeah.
And so I think we had played Friday, Saturday in Omaha, and then we were going to play Monday, Tuesday in Iowa.
Yeah.
And I remember getting called up like that after that game Saturday, like, hey, you're on a bird tomorrow. You're going to back up, because McElhinney was starting the playoffs because he had a really good year.
Yeah.
And then I flew up and I backed up. I landed at like 3:30, went to the house, said hi to everybody, and then straight to the rink, and just tried to stay out of everybody's way, because that was game 6.
Yeah, right. And it went to overtime.
Yeah.
Moss hit a crossbar and they win it.
Yeah, and Hasek was playing goal for Detroit. I remember that.
Yeah. Calgary held serve at home, right?
Yes.
They came back and they won game 3 and 4, went back to Detroit. Kipper gets pulled, comes back, overtime. The rest, they say, is history. All I remember about you in that one was there was a shot of you, they panned to you, and you had the biggest smile on your face, right? Like, it's game 6.
I was trying not to, too.
And you're smiling. But, and I every time I introduce him, I don't get to introduce him that much anymore, but every time I introduce him, still suspended, Jamie McLennan.
Yeah.
He has not served that suspension fully.
He's not recovered from that suspension, or the league certainly hasn't, for sure, right?
No.
Because he's done, and
he retired after that, and then still with games to go.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
So, he wanted out, right? Like,
he found his way.
He found his way.
Yeah, I'm going to take my stick to Holmstrom's face right now, because Holmstrom was exhausting in front of the net.
He was a beast.
He was unbelievable, and you can't do that stuff now. You really can't. But the amount of mental fortitude it would take for any goaltender to play in front of that maniac, like, you just want to drill him. That's why you wish Billy Smith would still be around for stuff like that, or Ronnie Hextall, or even Cloutier to a certain degree, guys that would just, Tim Thomas, that would just lose their mind. It took a different level. You go back and you watch those 90s, Detroit versus Dallas, or Dallas for, and Belfour and Osgood and Vernon, and literally guys are falling on you. You're getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
You're looking around. It's heavy.
It's heavy. That's a great way of putting it. It was just heavy net presence.
Yes.
Right. That it's comical now. And then again, it's just the way the game's developed, but it's comical when announcers lose their mind about traffic in front of goalies now, because it's nowhere near what it was. I mean, he sat in your lap.
Yes.
He sat in your lap.
And that is why they had they tried to have the crease rule where you couldn't stick any part of your body in there, because goalies are getting run over. You're basically playing with your butt touching the back of the net because guys are spearing you and pushing.
Brett Warner and Buffalo on line one. They'd like to have a word about this, right?
Yeah. Oh man,
right?
Yeah, I agree.
And then it was an overreaction to that.
Agreed. But just the amount of traffic you had to fight through, and all it was power play. You'd kind of run it low, and you have them collapse. You pass it back to the point. There'd be 900 people in front of the net, and you wire it as hard as you could, and then you'd fight for it in the middle of the net all the time. And it was just guys with black eyes and missing. That's where all the broken noses and missing teeth and everything came from.
Well, I going back to 2004, I remember ESPN shot the whole final in HD from the glass, and that became a special. And if you go back and you watch that series where it's all shot, it's a rodeo out there. Like Rhett Warner literally riding guys on their back all the way down, the hooking, the Ferentz with sticks between your leg,
the jackknife.
Oh my God!
Guys coming on a breakaway and he got the stick, it's just pushing his elbow out and hooking him and like going water skiing through the neutral zone.
And now I see sticks in a hand and the guy blows up, and it's like, oh my God, is that a major?
Yeah, I know.
It's only 20 years ago, folks.
It's crazy. Right? I still we'll play. They had some. I think it was on TS. I remember what station is irrelevant, but they had a little documentary series on the 5 most recent goaltenders that were inducted to the Hockey Hall of Fame. And it was Grant Fuhr, Eddie Belfour, Patrick Waugh, Martin Brodeur, and I'm obviously Dominic Hasek. And my kids were watching. They were just, this is awesome. This is what hockey
could be.
Could right. It's just hard hitting, fast paced, skill on display. It gives me shivers talking.
Can you imagine Maltby and Draper and McCarty against Lemieux in Colorado nowadays?
Man.
I mean, we'd have to shut the whole league down and have an investigation.
Yes.
Right? Like
yes.
That.
Well, I my first year, I was 16 and I called up to the Hitman. That's still when they'd had the separate warm-ups in the Western Hockey League. Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So the visiting team would go on for 20 minutes, full ice.
Yeah.
And then they flood, and then the home team would go on the ice for 20 minutes. They'd flood, and then the game would start because everybody is trying to beat the absolute wheels off of each other.
Right.
And
it's true.
Right.
It's true.
Yep. And it's to be able to watch that, and Claude Lemieux for all the cheap shots, and you had to keep your head on a swivel because he wasn't hitting you because he wanted to take you out of the play. He was hitting you to eliminate you from the series. Right.
He really was. And again, I'm not saying it's I'm not fawning for those days, but it's just interesting to see how far the game has come, right? And the 100%. Things that we get fired up about now. Look, I'm not talking about the Pavelski hit. That's a different story, but there's some things within the regular season that you kind of go, really? We're upset about this.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And it's funny. I was talking to the guys in the back too before I came on. It's like
they're so much more exciting than me, aren't they? That should be the show. You going over there and talking to them, that should be the podcast.
And that room looks terrible though. Like they got
that's where I was in there for a while.
Yeah, like that. There's no oxygen in there. It's musty and it's small and it's hot. And those lights are warm and it's got egg crate on the wall and.
Well, that's
just sad in there.
Baffling. That's not egg crate. That's baffling to break the sound up. I like it. I don't mind it.
Yeah.
And they're good dudes.
They're great.
They're great dudes.
I'm getting to know them better. But we were chatting about, I watch hockey now for guys that I cheer against. You know what I mean? Like if I don't,
you want the villain.
Yes. No, I don't want them to be around. You know what I mean? It's like I'm cheering against them. Like the Leafs, I'm watching that series because I don't want the Leafs to make it past the first round.
Right. You want to watch the villain.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And then once they're gone, it's like, well,
I'm not interested.
No, I'm not interested because I actually like both these teams, and it's okay, right?
Good things can happen to you,
right? You know, and I'm not as emotionally invested. But when I actually have a vest, like I used to play hockey against this guy, and he's playing the National Hockey League. I'd be jealous. I'm like, this guy is going to do great. I want him to fail. You know what I mean?
I do. I'm a little concerned that maybe we've gotten to a place that you might actually need some help with. That I might not be capable of guiding you through this conversation.
The amount of help that I would need, I would believe, is not going to be handled in this this segment.
All right.
Rob. Yeah.
Speaking of help, I need help from two different topics from you, but it's a choose your own adventure here on Just a Game. General manager search or Wolf?
Oh, I want to do both.
I know. We will get to both.
Okay.
I'm just asking which one do you want to talk about?
Wolf.
Okay. So Dustin Wolf, second year in a row, AHL goalie of the year. 4 years in a row, he's his goalie of the year in his league. Last two in the Western, first two in the American Hockey League. He's 22 now, but just by a week or so. Is he ready? What do we do here, Croner? What do we do with this kid?
I had no idea he was 22. I saw on Twitter, it's like happy 22nd birthday,
right?
Justin. I'm like, what? I went to a couple games, Wranglers games this season.
Yeah.
And
you worked with Sandra.
Sandra, yeah. She was great.
She's awesome.
And I'm sitting there like, this guy he's just so smooth. He's so, you think, as being like, I played with a lot of little goalies.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Bachman comes to mind in Dallas, where I was always impressed by him and his patience, his ability to read the play for not the lack of size, because you're still a bigger guy, but compared to a lot of others, right? You're smaller. How they could read the play, And I see Dustin Wolf, and I'm like, he's there everywhere. He's just there. He's calm. That game at the end of the season against San Jose, I'm so happy they gave it to him. Like,
okay, but what value does that game have?
Zero.
Okay.
It has zero value aside from him saying I played a game in the National Hockey League.
That's all it is, though.
It's more for him than anything else, right?
Okay.
1,000,000%.
Okay.
But this, because is he under contract for another? He's got to be under contract for another season.
Yeah,
right?
he's got. Yeah, they got control.
Yeah.
No, I mean he's 2 years into his pro contract, so he's got one more on his entry level.
Right. and it's a good problem to have.
It's a very good problem to have.
I know. 2 years in a row, American Hockey League goaltender of the year.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's done with the American Hockey League. If he goes and has any type of playoff run whatsoever, you're wasting his talents playing in the Western or in the American Hockey League.
Okay,
1,000,000%.
Okay,
even though that he's that young.
Okay,
I would make room
because
for him.
You could make a case that your path was to eventually back up Mika Kiprusoff, and we can get into the whole Phil Sauvé conversation. But that once you got to that was it. The tap's getting turned off, right?
Yep.
Like, dude has more wins than most goalies have starts in that league.
It's crazy.
Can he go from being that minute muncher to backing up Markstrom? And now Markstrom's not Kiprusoff. I grant you that. And he's not coming off a great year, and we'll get to that in a second. But he's also $6 million. So at least at the beginning, you think he's going to get the bulk of the work.
For sure. But now he's going to be the next part of his career where you're not just going to phase him into being a number one goaltender in the National Hockey League. You're going to start with Markstrom. If he falters again like he did last year, you're going to have more confidence to put Wolf in, and you're going to have to let him falter a little bit too, because he may not come, him being kind of an underdog his whole career, a late draft pick, coming in and working his way up and being as phenomenal as he is. There's always pressure. But you're starting kind of at the bottom of the mountain, and you're starting to work your way up.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas there's a lot of guys that come in, and I'm on the opposite trend where I came in as a top draft pick and I essentially worked my way down. You know what I mean? Like, things just didn't go according to plan. And that's not me playing a small violin here. It's two different perspectives from right.
Right. No, we could get into a whole conversation about what the pressure of being a first round pick is.
Right.
Ask Eric Nystrom, ask Brent Krahn, because you guys went through it. Right.
And so you see,
and it's real.
100% it is. But because he's done so well in a short amount of time, you're almost waiting for him to have a bit of an obstacle, right? And the consistency is the main thing that they look for in goaltenders. Can we count? Like, look at UC Saros.
Yes.
Right? Little guy.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, he's a little guy. And they have to prove every night that they're worth it. And Dustin Wolf has proved every night that he's worth it. And I think that at the start of next season, you make room for him, whatever that looks like.
Well, be moving Vladar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You make room for him, and you the way that they've stuck with Markstrom of last year. I mean, I know that's contractually the big money. He's your number one guy. He falters off the gate. You give Dustin Wolf a bit of time to work his way through it. I honestly think right now you got to keep him moving, because if you keep him back in the American League,
yes,
you're mentally you're going to
what can happen there? Let's say they keep Vladar and they keep Markstrom and they put him back and he's going to play a bunch. What could happen with that?
Mentally, you just become very frustrated, and you sit there and like, well, I've kind of done everything I can at this league, and you're still putting me back here. I want to be in the big club. I want to be in the big show, and you start to negative self-talk your way a little bit, or your performance could suffer because you don't want to be there. I don't want to be in the American Hockey League. I've done it. I've done it all. Why am I not in the National Hockey League? And there's a multitude of reasons for that, like contractually, for example, right? Or they got starters, but mentally you can really get yourself into a bad spot. There's been plenty of players, not even just in the goaltending position.
Oh, I was going to say Matty Phillips is in the exact same.
But they're just like, what else do I have to do to get an opportunity, right? Yep. What else? Trade me then. Get rid of me. Trade me. Oh, we're not going to trade. You're too good. Yeah. Or we're going to sit here and let you rot. And then we go, they'll come down and say, well, you got to be mentally tough. This is the rigors of playing professional sports. There's ups and downs. But
by the way, this isn't Brent making something up. This is real.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000,000%. Yes. Right. And it's like, that's the thing. You compare yourself to your peers, right? You're competitive. I remember being in Omaha and having Tom Webster come down. Remember old Webby?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome guy.
Absolutely.
And I remember him sitting on the bench with me, and we were chatting about goaltenders. He was kind of, Pekka Rinne was playing in the league, and Corey Crawford, and Ryan Miller was in Rochester. And he just, what do we got to do to kind of get you to that next level, that Ryan Miller level, that Pekka Rinne, whatever, right? Yeah. And in jest, because Webby was awesome, I said, well, trade Kiprusoff, and then I can go and play and figure it out. And he laughed at me really hard. And then he said, no, really. and for my mindset, not worried, but I focused too much on what others were doing. I played with Cam Ward in the lockout year.
Yep.
Right. And so everybody in the lockout year, 05 or whatever it was, some great teams, like Patrice Bergeron's playing in Providence, right? Mm-hmm. Mike Camilleri's in Manchester, and Jeff Carter, and anyway, it doesn't matter. But all these guys, it was a great league. And Cam Ward had an unbelievable, he played 50 games. I played 35. Yep. Great season. The next year, he just goes straight to Carolina. They had Martin Gerber and him. Yep. That was the way it was from the end of the season. This is what we're doing, right? And he had his ups and downs through that season. And then Gerber got sick in the first round, and Cam went in and was lights out and never let go.
Never let go.
Right?
Yeah. And
I always thought that from my perspective, I was like, well, that's awesome that he got his opportunity and he ran with it. You like to see guys that get in and get their opportunity. Mm-hmm. But Kiprusoff was too damn good and too healthy. Mm-hmm. So at every training camp that I would have, no matter how good I would play, we're not going to have you on the bench to play 8 games. And that's when Kiprusoff, he was playing 72 games, I think, or 70 games, right? He was 75
Absolutely,
games, right? So he's like, Darryl would have it, and I can't say I disagree with him. He'd say, like, we're not going to have you just sit here and waste away on the bench. And in my mind, I'm like, let me waste away on the bench. I want to be in the national. But bird's eye view, it makes more sense for your guy to be playing, because he says, if he does go down, we're going to call, you or Curtis McElhinney up, and you're going to play.
Right. You're like, if he ever gets hurt.
Right.
Which he didn't.
For 7 years. For 7 years.
Yeah. Got hurt.
So you got a guy like Wolf he's just blown the doors off of everything that he's done. And we see this last 4 years, like, wow, he's obviously gone through a lot to get here, right? We don't see that. We just see that we're getting the benefit of how good he is. But you send him back again, it's like, well, and then what do they say? Oh, go out and win the Calder Cup. Then then you can come back and talk to us, right? It's like, well, how much stuff are you going to be putting in front of me before you actually give me a chance?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And eventually after that, well, I would, no matter what I do, it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
So let me just play out my career here. Your play starts to dwindle. You don't give a shit. Right. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, okay, well, and then you get a chance someplace else.
By the way, Noah, the goalie's brother, Ty, doesn't like it when we swear.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's good. That's
just saying, Ty and Noah.
You know what?
Yeah.
And he's competitor out there.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
And I don't want to have to face that music.
No,
I'm sorry, Ty. I'm sorry, Ty.
Point that out, Ty.
My bad.
Your back, buddy.
My bad.
We got your back.
My bad. I was getting a little heated there. Don't come track me down. It scares me,
Oh, it should.
Yeah.
Okay, let's leave Wolf, because I think you've said it. I think we're all in the same boat. Kid's got to play. Now, separate him, Markstrom, Vladar. How do you go from Jennings-esque to bottom of the barrel in 1 year with Daryl Sutter as your coach and his frame of reference on how the game is played?
I think Markstrom had a lot to prove last season.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come in with a mentality that you have a lot to prove, you are ready to play every night. And this season, he came in off one of the best years of his career, if not the best.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
How do you maintain that? Right?
How do you keep that level?
How do you keep that level? Because you know what? I know if I'm playing Mario Kart with my kids and I'm in second place and I got my eye on first place, I know exactly where I have to go every time to pass that person.
Yeah.
But now when I'm leading that group,
Mm-hmm.
how do I stay there? Because there's always people nipping at your heels.
Well, that would be the Turtles.
Exactly.
The
Koopas, the Troopas, whatever they're called, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely. We just
This
saw
is
the Mario
why we bring you on for these analogies that everybody can
Yeah.
fully understand.
Right. And so you sit there and being a starting goaltender is a mentality. It's
Absolutely
it's a mentality, right? So I would marvel at guys that could play every game. Like, I'm going back, but like Shane Bandera that played
Yes,
for
and
the Red Deer Rebels.
Yeah, absolutely.
There were 72 games that we play in that season. Shane would play 68 every year. Brent Sutter would throw him back out there, and he would go out there, and he wasn't always the best, but he was always good enough.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so, like Henrik Lundqvist, he could play a ton of games, right? You got a guy like Luongo, he could play a ton of games. Vasilevsky is probably the best example right now of a goaltender that can play a boatload of games.
Yep.
And be at his right.
Yep.
And so that mentality, not everybody's got that mentality. Jonathan Quick, too, in his prime, right? He
Mhm.
could play a million games. And
Yeah.
he played for Darryl. I don't think Markstrom has that mentality yet. And I think this season is a bit of a kick in the butt for him just to be that guy, right? I think I would have liked to have seen the Flames give Vladar a bit more opportunity when he was playing as well as he was, and Markstrom was tripping over himself.
We forget that sometimes. The Vladar was setting a record there at one
Yes.
point, right, for points.
100% he was. He tied the record, right?
Yep.
Right. And so I wouldn't, easy to say now, but I've said this throughout the whole season. I would have given Vladar, even if he played bad, he back to back, second game you play bad, you're going back in for the third game. Let Markstrom push for that starting job again. I think because that's another way to motivate guys. It sucks, but you don't want to lose your starting job.
Yeah.
And so, I also can appreciate what Darryl did, trying to help him fight through it, because you know what? Once you start playing every game in a row, they all become one game. Like for me, Ryan McGill did that for me in Omaha, where, because me and Curtis McElhinney my first year, and, I'd play 2 or 3, Mac would play 1 or 2, 2 or 3, blah, 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 blah. And I wasn't good for the first, half of the season. I was inconsistent. I played some good games, some bad games. McElhinney was consistent. And then Ryan McGill came to me and says, you know what? You are going to play the next 20 games in a row. And I think I played 19 of 22.
Right.
And in my mind, I'm like, well, I need a break. Like, I'm not doing good. Like, I need to reset. I need to refocus. And it was just, you're in. He says, you're in until I tell you you're not. So you're playing every game, just so you know. And by about game 12, I was like, oh, I remember getting a goalie of the month that month. I on the tail end of all those games in a row, and the team was playing great too. But I all of a sudden I got comfortable with the mentality. It's like, I'm going in every, as opposed to looking at the board. Oh, who's starting tonight?
Who's starting tonight? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a mentality, and not every great goaltender has a starter's mentality, even though they have the starter's skill set.
Yeah. And
Markstrom doesn't have the starter's mindset yet. He's got the skills, but he doesn't have the between the ears. And he not saying he can't get there, but I think that's what this season showed.
You mentioned Omaha and Ryan McGill. Can you tell me a story about a car ending up on the top of the building?
No, I don't know that one.
You don't know that
I don't
one?
know that one. Maybe, or I've forgotten, but I don't know that one.
I thought you were the one that told me that.
No. Maybe
Because McGill's a prankster.
Yes, he is. But
Right.
I don't remember any of that. Maybe
maybe it was after you.
He could have been Quad City, or was it Omaha?
Oh, I thought it was Omaha, but
Because I was there for the 2 years in Omaha. And I don't remember.
so folks, we don't know this story, but there's a really good one about a car ending up on the top of the arena. All right. News of the week. Brad Treliving walks away.
Yeah.
We had Peter Marr on before. It's never happened with the Flames before. They wanted him. They offered him. Pete said they offered him 2 contracts. There's a lot that has been made about his relationship with Darryl. We know you played with Darryl. We know what Darryl is all about. What do you make of the situation the local hockey heroes find themselves in?
You know what? It's not surprised.
That's the part. Why is everybody in the last 24 hours going, this is surprising?
Well, because
It's surprising.
He's going to lose that battle, unfortunately. And
Who's losing?
Brad.
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
You know why? Because you can just see it, right? So Daryl comes in, you got the ownership group, you got Murray Edwards at the head of that ownership group, right? He's a very successful person. All those guys at the top are super, super successful. They demand lots out of people. I've met a lot of super successful people. Not all of them have the best people skills on the planet. They demand a lot out of the person, and you don't make.
They don't know why you can't do it like that.
Right.
It's why superstars aren't great coaches sometimes.
Agreed, right?
Yeah.
And then you got a guy like Daryl, who's an excellent coach, who holds people accountable, who's hard on guys, makes people uncomfortable. And you see that from the top. And this is, once again, my opinion, folks, nothing more.
No, that's why.
And so you see those big wheels up top saying, that's the guy that I want running my team, because he's not letting those entitled $25 million guys run around like it's a country club, because I started from nothing and I built it to this. And that's exactly what these guys are going to do. So Daryl does that to them. But then when he kind of does that to the new age group, you get people feeling uncomfortable. You get people, you get and then that's not totally on Daryl, but you get Huberdeau's point drop. He's trying to figure out himself where he's going to go. Markstrom struggles this season. There's no captain on the team, which I
bristle at that. I really do.
And so Brad's a guy that is for I've actually got to know him, well over the years. And everybody right off the top of the bat says just what a quality human being that guy is, right?
Yeah.
So great guy.
Yep.
Awesome guy. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Yep.
He is in a fight. I don't think he knew he couldn't win. As far as
you don't think he knew he couldn't win, or you think he figured out?
He figured out he couldn't win.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to constantly have to battle to say, hey, you know what, we're calling these guys up, or we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and it's just met with friction and frustration and and all that stuff. After a while, it's like, sure, you know what? Here are the keys. Take the car. I'll go find another car. Right. And that's just the way it goes. Right, wrong, or indifferent.
Yep.
I would have liked for him to stay. I think he's very well respected. People would go through the wall for that guy. But now here we are. So there's no point in saying coulda, woulda, shoulda. And like, I think he just knew he wasn't going to win that battle. And so he chose to move on.
A couple of things that I have said that, I'm able to sit here and look at this camera and talk to the people that are watching and say what I want, and I don't get a lot of pushback. So I'd like to offer a couple things to you to see if you disagree with me in the way I approach this. Daryl, and I just think Daryl doesn't understand that nowadays a coach has a responsibility to develop young players. I think when Daryl was in his prime winning, and it's not that long ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I think you developed them in the minor leagues. They came up as finished products. I think the salary cap, the stagnant salary cap, all of those sort of things, I think it's forced coaches now. You have to do some development of young players at the NHL level. And he seemed very reluctant to do that. I can be proven wrong, completely proven wrong, but Matt Phillips will go to a different organization next year, and I expect he'll be an everyday NHL player.
Yes.
And for a team that missed the playoffs, the way they missed the playoffs, overtime, shootouts, 1 goal. A guy that's offensive should have found a home here, should have been played here. And I think if Daryl mea culpas and goes, hey, I'm going to have to adapt to that, no problem.
Yeah.
Cool. But I think that was the shortcoming this year, is just refused to develop the young guys at the NHL level.
And then you got a guy like Toffoli, who played his first season with Daryl in LA and won a cup, I believe, right? That's kind of how that worked. And
right. But didn't have the same role as he had this year with Daryl.
1,000,000%, right? It's like you got to earn your keep, you got to earn your way, and then we'll get to you when we're ready for you, not when you're ready for us.
Right.
And I don't disagree with you for a second. You have to. It sucks because you have to swallow your pride. You have to swallow your ego a little bit too. There's a lot of bravado and a lot of chest beating when it comes to, I guess, any industry that you're in. Pro sports is obviously at the top of that list. Where, hey, you hired me for a reason. You let me do it my way, or beat it. Right.
Yep.
And this is the way I've done it. And now I got, now I have 2 cups too. So how are you going to argue with me? I've did it before, and I'm going to do it again. And this is how I do things. So don't tell me what to do. But there are, like you said, salary cap, right? Like you got to find ways to make it work. You can't just do what you want, right? You can't, and Lucic playing all those minutes that he got this year. Why couldn't you put Phillips?
Because you get pushed around,
right?
Because you get run out of the building,
right? I don't think so. The game doesn't play. The game doesn't work like that anymore, right? You don't get run out of the building.
To me, it's the Richie part that And again, I have nothing against these guys. Unfortunately,
it's not their fault.
No, it's not their fault. But there needed to be a way to play with a little more youth and a little more piss and vinegar.
Yes.
And be prepared to lose with it, but also be prepared to win with it.
Yes. And that you have the young guys come up, they're going to make mistakes, but they're going to have a ton of energy. And all of a sudden, you know what? Hey, like guys that have been around for a long time, it's a job. Like, you know, after you've, played 14 years, 10 years, 8 years in the National Hockey, doing something for so long, it's like, oh, you're privileged, but you live it.
But it's all you know too.
Right.
It's all you know.
It's a job, right?
That's
so
right.
you can run into somebody at a restaurant and say, oh, you're so lucky you play in the National Hockey. Yeah, you're right. It's afforded me a great lifestyle. I love sport. I love everything about it. But you do it every day. It's a job.
That's right.
So you have a kid that's like, I want to be here every day and I want to show you how hard I want. And also like it can help guys that have been around a long time too say, oh man, look at him out there. Like he's loving it.
You don't think Pelche helped Huberto?
No kidding.
Right? We saw it.
No kidding.
But here we are. Your former teammate, Craig Conroy, number one on the top. And my position is not Craig. The question shouldn't be, is Craig Conroy right for the Calgary Flames? Is the Calgary Flames right for Craig Conroy? What else is he supposed to do?
I know.
He's 12 and a half years doing this.
Yeah.
He's done every part of what an assistant general manager can do. He's been part of world championships and I believe an Olympic program with Team USA. To me, he's qualified.
Well, he's qualified, but I wouldn't want to take the job if I was him here.
Why?
Because of Daryl. I wouldn't want to play for him and then have to be his, not boss, but Daryl knows what he's going to be met with a ton of friction too, right off the bat. Right? Do you not think like Craig,
I think, but I don't think this is what I think. If Craig Conroy takes this job, Craig Conroy's convinced he can work with Daryl.
Agreed. And maybe he can. And I'm not saying he can't, but I'm just
no. I know
for what I would if I was him,
I
would say no, thanks. I'm going to go someplace else.
Yep.
Because I only know Craig as an awesome teammate, a great guy. He's got his opinions. He's a smart guy.
Very smart.
He's very intelligent. And I just know him as very affable, easygoing. Oh, sure. Hey, guy, and you talk with him and then you actually get serious and you talk with him. And the guy knows what he's doing.
I wouldn't use the word cutthroat, but he gets very serious.
100%.
And he could I believe he can make decisions. He's just waiting to make decisions.
Agreed. And almost like he's got a ton of enthusiasm and he, much like Wolf, deserves a shot at, he's paid his dues.
Oh, absolutely.
If we're going to go back and say, if you put your time in at every level to get this job, by that merit, Wolf should be on the team next year and Craig Conroy should be the GM here if he wants it.
I'm going to leave it there. I don't know what else there is to say.
Yeah.
What are you up to? You got anything to plug? You got any new movies? Got an album coming out?
You're good like this. You really help me out. And every time you say, can you plug somebody or anything you want to do? I'm like, my mind just goes. Phew.
Well, you got an event coming up, don't you?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you do that then?
For the Headwater Learning Center.
Yes.
Wow. It's like you wrote this down or something.
It's almost as if I know what I'm doing.
Wow. They approached me and asked if I could be the MC for
not the speaker.
No.
The MC, the host.
The MC.
The man of the hour.
And I put it up on my Twitter. I retweeted it, so you can go to the link. I'm so completely unprepared for any of this stuff here. And they said, "Hey, we want you to be the MC." And I'm like, "You understand? I've never done this before."
Right.
And then that's when I turned to you, my good buddy Rob Kerr, and I said, "What am I doing here?" And
you got all the tools.
And I'm jacked. I'm absolutely jacked.
When is it?
I want to say June 12th.
It's in your calendar, right?
I would hope so, but we don't have time.
Would you share it on social tonight for everybody?
I will absolutely do that. We
got a big audience today, so I'd like the audience to see it.
Yeah, I absolutely will. Okay. I'll retweet it again.
So we can do that.
The Headwater Learning Center, the charity golf tournament at the Glencoe that I am emceeing. Mm-hmm. I have absolutely zero information on it whatsoever, so I will post it tonight.
Hey, it's early, dude.
It is.
There's other things going on.
There is. And we did a photo shoot too. Like we did a bunch of they put a green screen behind me.
Oh no.
And I have
just the photos that the barn burner guys got of you.
Yes. Oh, those are terrible.
Is it that kind of photo shoot?
No, it was more of a video. Like I'm promoting stuff. I'm talking about things, right? And I had to bring my golf bag and pretend that I'm golfing in jeans, essentially.
Where were you when you had your golf club stolen?
Oh man!
That was the Team Canada Alumni tournament.
No. That was
no, they didn't steal it there, but you had it stolen before that.
Yeah, I got my hole in one at the Calgary Flames golf tournament.
Yeah,
and then
that's right. It was September,
and then I had
because what did you win for that?
10 grand in season tickets.
10 grand
and season tickets to the Calgary Calgary Flames. And, you know, it was
So
all
you're
skill.
a season ticket holder. You should have your opinions heard.
Well, absolutely, right? And you know what? And I've just missed the hole-in-one every year to renew them that I've missed out on. But I know what? It's so funny. It's actually a bad idea for me to have those tickets.
Yeah.
Because I give them away to everybody.
Right.
So I remember I gave it to my kids' auction for school for whatever for a game.
Yeah.
And then I gave them to a buddy and the same tickets
for the same game.
To 6 different people.
So that could be a problem.
Right. So
was that a quick call to Tanya? I need help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right away. Because I gave it actually to one of my buddies, his son and his buddy too, right? And so he's like, hey, Croner, the tickets don't work. I'm like, well, it never happens. You know what? Let me make one quick phone call, get that sorted out for you. I apologize, guys. And then they're like, well, they've already been scammed. I'm like, it took me 2 days later to figure out that I had pooched that one pretty good. But with great power comes great responsibility, Rob.
Absolutely, it does. You'll also be appearing at the Masters annual Masters golf tournament.
Yeah,
aren't you?
Oh yeah, every year.
Flames alumni.
That is literally
May 25th.
May 25th. 25th.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I got a bit of a favor to ask you.
Anything you need.
The talking goalie was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Can't be there. The plan is right now. You think I know what I'm about to say, but I'm not.
Oh.
The plan right now is the legend, Noah the goalie, and Harrison the tender.
Oh man.
Right?
Yes.
That's the plan right now.
That is the plan.
That's the plan.
Yes.
Yes. So I need you to check in on him.
Yeah, 1,000,000%.
Okay.
That is great because they, you know what? Not only did they blow the doors off me in the game there a couple weeks ago, now they're just stealing all the thunder.
They're stealing all the thunder.
Now
they're not emceeing anything yet.
Not yet. But that's coming.
That's coming.
I got to be careful here now, right? Because these guys, they're nipping at the heels
They
here
are
now.
nipping at your heels.
Oh boy,
Croner, you're the best.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Brent Krahn, everybody. Love it. Brought to you by the Ski Sellers Snowboard, skisellersnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary, 3 locations, McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, 17th Avenue Southwest, just off of 14th Street and Bow Ridge Road Northwest by McDonald's, just down from Windsport. And not just skis and snowboards on sale right now. They got their winter stuff. There's still snow in the mountains. Might not be for much longer, but there's still most snow in the mountains. So check them out, skisellersnowboard.com. Time now for the final mile. A couple things. One, this is really cool. Hockey Calgary held its awards ceremony this past Friday. And thanks to Cammie Kepke, she hosted. Oops. Don't worry about that. That's okay. Anyway, one of the awards, the Executive Director Award from Hockey Calgary, 2 years ago, I was honored to have received it. This year, and I think it's Simons Valley, and I apologize, but a gentleman named Balv Verdi won that award. Balv Verdi, but I believe it's Simons Valley. Balv and I went to high school together 40 years ago in Edmonton. Just think about that for a second. In the span of 3 years, 2 guys from McNally High won the Executive Director's Award for Hockey Calgary. That's freaky. All right. By the way, one of my passions right now in a group that I'm proud to work for and help is Parachutes for Pets. They've got a golf tournament. Everybody knows I am a big golfer. Like, I love golf. You know, I would never lie to you. But the only thing I love more than golf is golf for a great cause. And it is Parachutes for Pets, our first annual Tee It Up for Pets charity golf tournament. We've got a sale going on, an early bird, $225 per player, breakfast, the whole shenanigans, swag bag, prizing, dinner, the whole 9 yards. But it's going to help Parachutes for Pets, which is a local group that helps pets of homeless people, of seniors, of veterans, kids in foster care. These are the pets that are falling through the cracks. So it's imperative that we raise some money. Can you put that one back up there for just a sec, Gav? Anyway, if you can help them out, go to parachutesforpets.com, or the QR code's right there. Come back and listen to the podcast and grab it. 4-person Texas Scramble. There's going to be a really cool connector to this. We got a hook coming. But anyway, help them out. They could really use it. And last, but certainly not least, we've talked a lot about the change for the Calgary Flames and whether it was necessary or not, why it happened, all those things, who will be. I just want to speak to the man. Brad Treliving for a second, not as a general manager, but just as my friend. And I have very honored to call Brad Treliving a friend of mine. I'm lucky enough to be involved in some really, really cool things with Hockey Calgary, with kids sport, with Heroes, lots of things. And it's really, as you guys know, really important for me that that we help and give back and particularly leadership skills and things like that. And Brad was always the first person I turned to. We had lunches, we had breakfasts, and I was always bouncing. Nobody that I know reads more books about leadership, about millennials, about just the soft skills, and is more invested in it than Brad Treliving. And Brad was always kind enough to help. And I don't ever remember asking Brad if he could attend an event and he said he couldn't, or he made himself available. This past October, we did our Hockey Inspires Leadership Day on trauma-informed coaching. And I went to him and I said, this is what I'm doing. He says, I'm in. When is it? So he was in before he even knew when it was. He's also a guy, and I point to Will Nault and Wes Gilbertson. I retweeted a couple social media posts. Say what you will, this is a business, and sometimes it's a cutthroat business. But Brad was always the first to be a human being. And Will talked about when his mom passed away, Brad reaching out. Will talked about his dad passing away, and Brad reached out. All kinds of good things and bad things in my life have happened, and the first guy always to reach out is Brad. And he's always been there. I was fortunate to work in the same building with him for 4 years. I don't think we ever talked hockey when we ran into the hallways. I think we were always just talking about life, family, and leadership and those types of things. I am a big, huge, using a wrestling term, mark for Brad Treliving. Now, it's a business, and he will go somewhere else, and he will be a GM where he chooses to be, or he'll work in hockey wherever he chooses to be. The Calgary Flames will go on. They will get a new general manager. They will play again next year. All of those sort of things are going to happen. Who's right, who's wrong, that's for other people to debate. I just want to take a moment. Those things you hear about Brad, when you hear the media talking about him being a good human being, I'm just telling you, if you trust me, if you think what I'm saying is legit, I'm telling you, this guy was on another level. He just was on another level. I texted him on Monday, and within a minute and a half, he texted me back. And he's just always been that way. But a couple of times where I've had issues or struggles or whatever, one of the first guys always to reach out is Brad Treliving. That's what you need to know. Peter Marr, Brent Krahn, this was a fun show. We got another one for you coming up on Friday. Eric DeHatchuk from The Athletic will join us next week. Chevy and Nasty. And he's back, folks. At least he's back with me. Bruce Dobigan. Really, really excited about that. Thanks to Gavin. Thanks to Jack. Thanks to Princey. Can't wait to see you guys again on Friday. And one last time, thanks to Cammie and thanks to Danny for taking care of the show on Monday. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you soon.
When there's two sides to every coin, then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks, and some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fist at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I